All right, the recording's up. I am muting myself and bringing everybody in.
Just tell me when I'm live.
You are good to go, Glenn.
All right, I'd like to bring to order the Board of Finance regularly scheduled meeting for Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. In attendance are 5 board members, with Ricky Ramos not being here. I'd like to start by Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice
and justice for all.
All right. Do we have any public comment to start the meeting? Hearing no public comment, we had no communication or correspondence. Brianna?
No, we did not.
Okay.
So we just need, I think we're the minutes.
Yep, go ahead, fire it away.
I just would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from June 10th, 2020 regular meeting.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. All right, Steve, we're on to you. Unmute. Unmute. Text him, will you, Eric?
Sorry, I flipped over to something else and I wasn't on the thing to unmute. So I won't have a long update today. Marcia is going to give us an overview of financing for the COVID, the 4 sources of income that we think we can get. I'll let her get into more detail in her presentation. I won't go over it twice. We are pretty much almost completely set for preparing town hall for opening to the public. We're going to be doing the Board of Ed sneeze shields this week, should be finished by Friday, and the library, we should complete them next week. We don't have an exact opening date for the library yet, but we're hoping that's going to be in the next couple weeks. The problem with that is the governor has pushed off the phase 3 reopening of Connecticut from the 20th this month. He hasn't picked a date to move to because he's afraid that with 44 states showing higher cases of coronavirus, he doesn't want Connecticut to go too fast. So we're going to go slowly on that. We're where we need to be. We still have 166 cases of the coronavirus in town. The good news over the last 3 weeks or so, all cases that have new cases that have been reported are intra-family, meaning within a household, not new people in town getting it. And we still unfortunately have 8 people who have lost their lives to the coronavirus. We're tracking revenue and expenses very, very carefully. Don't see anything major as of yet. Any changes? There were, I think, 7, last time I got the report, 7 applications for extension of the date to pay their taxes, you know, the 90 days that we allowed people, for a total of, I think, it was around 350,000. Roberta's going to get us a final update, but that's not a meaningful sum of money given our budgets. So that's it for me. Any questions, issues you want me to cover?
None for me. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have one, Steve.
Sure.
Thanks for the report. Should we, in theory, be looking forward to having some in-person meetings potentially at our next meeting a month from now?
Possible. I think what we need to do there is look at both what the governor's executive orders say. It is possible to meet in groups of less than 25, as long as you can feel you can do it safely and your director of public health agrees you can do that. Another big consideration is how comfortable are the boards in doing that?
Right, so clearly,
go ahead.
Clearly, I would think you'd do something along the lines of people that feel they should stay home can stay home. Certainly anybody that felt ill would be told to stay home. Yes. And possibly we could have it in 133 where we have even more room.
That's probably where we would hold it. The problem we have with that, and this is a small concern of mine, is that there are a limit on the amount of people you can have in one group. But the rule is if you hold a public meeting, you must allow everyone who wants to attend to attend. So if you only have room for 50 and 52 people show up, you can't have the meeting. You can't do Zoom, and you can put it on YouTube, you can publish it. So that's what we've been a little bit afraid of. I don't think it's a real problem, but we need to be aware of that. And we would probably do it in 133, move people all around. We typically get, what, 5 or 6 people coming. So I don't think it's a problem. But we'll play it by ear. If we can open town hall and keep it clean.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Marcia, we're on to you.
You should be able to see my screen. I'll just go through quickly. Let me find where I am here. As far as this year, we're still accumulating the numbers for this year. The revenues at the end of the year and the monthly reports, you know, we don't care if something crosses over the threshold for the months, but we certainly do for the year. So we're collecting all the final year-end deposits and posting those. The expenditures, you have an expenditure report with some transfers in it through June 18th. That I don't know of any significant changes. I don't know of any surprises. We're working on closing the books, which to us means that, why is my screen not going forward? Hold on, let me figure out why you can't see what I see. Has it switched over to a new screen? All right.
We're locked on your cover sheet.
Yeah.
Marcia, at the top of your screen, check that you haven't paused it.
Check it out. What?
There's a pause button for screen sharing. Check at the top of your screen.
It says live.
You know, this actually happened during the Board of Selectmen meeting when somebody was presenting a PDF. It actually stayed on the main slide for the entire presentation. So I don't know. It's interesting that it's happening here too.
So this isn't, let me just get out of.
Can you move it on your TV? I mean, on your monitor? It's just not moving here?
Let me just switch the monitors that I'm sharing it from.
Okay. Weird.
All right, share screen, and I'll do monitor 2. All right, not as pretty, but it'll work. So can you see? Oops.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the expenditures, again, that we're trying to close the books, meaning that we're trying to get the final purchase orders in. We've asked all final invoices in, so then we can close the purchase orders. We've asked to have everyone do that by July 31st because we want to start doing our financial statements for August 1st. We're in the process of balancing the June bank accounts. We're expecting July 31st, we'd have some pretty good numbers. So in August, if we have it done for then or September, we'll be asking for final transfers from you. We have, as far as COVID costs, we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow where we're going to talk about FEMA. We've got some invoices some purchase orders that are open as encumbrances, which will close, and we may have to reissue, just switching the fiscal year on if they were coming in, if they're not coming in. So those will be the changes that we're thinking are coming up. Tonight, you did get a request for a transfer. The Board of Selectmen have already approved it. Essentially, what we're doing is we're sweeping out any overages that we knew of as of June 18th and throwing them into the contingency fund. There's 3 places where we're asking for more money that are not that one transaction. HR professional fees, as you know, that we had a significant amount of money in next year's contingency budget for legal fees for the union negotiations, and the union negotiations cost a little more than we thought this year, and but are completed. There's the final contract, I'm not sure if it's written or not, so there may be a little bit, but it's just a difference in the fiscal year. Overall, if the 2 fiscal years compared to budget will be under budget, but we needed more in that year. The voluntary firefighters, the LOSAP program, as we're calling it, that's the pension program that that they get. There were a few new enrollees, so we needed a little more money there. And then the COVID contingency, we added money for school PPE that at that time we were thinking that it would be all ordered at June 30th. And again, there's some adjustments that we know now will be made, but the biggest thing that we're doing is trying to pull everything out and move it to contingency. As far as where do we stand, Steve was asking me this question, that this $872,000 that we're moving to contingency is a surplus in the town side. The education estimate is about 400,000, and on the Board of Ed side. That gives us a surplus of 1.2 million, almost 1.3 million. And again, we'll find out more as we close purchase orders. So I would expect that that would only go up. We already have 2 things in the budget. We had some that we were pulling in for COVID and some that we were pulling in from the non-lapsing fund. So we will have more surplus than what we had expected at the time of the budget. And that makes sense because at the time of the budget, we didn't have schools closed for the entire year. If I remember back that far, we thought we were coming back on May 20th or something. So that's just kind of where we stand there. Our big unknown is this COVID stuff. And again, this is just so frustrating to work with. But yesterday I did go through and I made sure that I have read each and every email with every update, read all the different directions I could find. FEMA, there's no real changes. I'll cover 75%. They won't cover distance learning. That's one thing we know they won't cover. We have to have this submitted and approved before we go to state funding, which is we'll talk about later. That
Hey, Marcia.
Yes.
Distance. What do you mean by distance learning? That could be a big umbrella.
Well,
Thanks,
their
Dan.
quote was distance learning. They don't cover is what it says in their paperwork, and what we were questioning at the time was computers and Chromebooks. That we didn't get more specific, but they do say in their paperwork that it doesn't cover distance learning.
And that can be defined a couple ways, Dan. I think, if we were buying Chromebooks for the use in the building, maybe it would be covered. I don't know. But distance learning, they haven't defined it yet.
Yeah.
But but computers and Chromebooks, I don't think would be included. That's our guess right now.
So that's FEMA. We have a meeting tomorrow to go through, just kind of solidify where do we stand on our COVID expenses, allocating them between the fiscal years. What more are we expecting? That luckily Greg Dembowski is doing some of the FEMA work and doing some of the work with the health and safety of reopening. So we'll have those conversations tomorrow. So that's the one grant, FEMA. We have to do that before we do anything else. We have to look at the Education and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. That's through the CARES Act. We do have an allocation for that of $74,096 that will cover education. And every time we ask about education costs, people go back, the different grantors go back and say, oh, well, there's education funds out there for you. Okay, there's $74,000. That's not a lot of education funds. But we have to do that first. Ken is working on that application, and we want to take that and apply it to the Chromebooks, that it will allow us to buy technology for students, not the laptops, but the students, curriculum, reopening, learning gaps, and social and emotional support for students. That is what their write-up says. I don't really know what that is, but that's what we're allowed to use that for. So that application is in the works. I don't know the timing of when the cash will come in, but right now that's not an issue. The next one that, so those are the first two federal programs. The Department of Public Health has something. We have an allocation of $14,848, and so far we've received in $10,500. We've spent it on some overtime, some computers. I still have to do the June report for next week, but the cash has been received. It's not significant. And then we have the Federal Small Cities Block Grant, that in the past we've used that for housing rehabilitation. It's possible that we could reallocate some of the money that we have right now for housing rehabilitation, 160,000, and use it for COVID costs. This one is the one that, again, we had it was supposed to be due on July 10th, but they don't have any answers. They don't know what they're working on yet. So they had a roundtable discussion yesterday, talking about some of the ideas of what they have covered, what they haven't covered. But it will be a challenge to try and use this money. That we know for sure it won't cover education. They're the ones that sent us back to that other grant. That it will be a challenge to use it, because a lot of this through the HUD program is for low income. And overall, that if we were Bridgeport, we could say, well, the whole town is low income. And so we will use it on a town-wide program. We don't have a town that's all low income, so that's going to be a problem there. But we might be able to use it for something they call immediate need. And so we were hoping that maybe some of the PPE, some of the sneeze shields, and the ambulance additional hours might be covered here, but we don't know. Before we can apply for anything, we have to amend our plan, and that's what we've been working on. There was a public hearing Monday night, just so we can try to use this money and be considered for it. So those four we have to look at first, and then we go to the state money. The state has, in the first round, awarded us $371,000, but it's for expenses paid by June 30th. That one doesn't, that one covers, that would cover the 25% of FEMA that the town would have to pay. Things that are not covered by FEMA, for example, distance learning, would be covered in there. But that's just our first tranche, and that's more money than we paid as of June 30th. I talked to him today, Martin Heft, he's the undersecretary of OPM that's heading up this grant. And I said, well, could that money be carried over? Well, no, they don't know. That they haven't decided yet. Okay, and this is only half of the money that the state received to distribute to the towns. I said, well, when could we apply for the second half for costs after June 30th? And he said, we don't know. We haven't decided that yet. So it's just frustrating that, so we have no guarantee of any other money from them, but we do have the possibility of more money. That so that's where the grant stands, and we're just again, we're attending every webinar. We're trying to get any money anywhere we can.
Well, can I give a little history on that? Just jump in here, Marcia. The state got $111 million from the feds about 3 months ago. They're allowed to keep 10% of it, $11 million. So there's $100 million they can distribute and are supposed to distribute to municipalities. They did a survey, a quick down and dirty survey, and they asked each town and city, how much do you think you'll have in COVID-related expenses by June 30th? And it was a very kind of a casual survey. They didn't say it was associated with getting funding. They didn't say it was associated with this $111 million. So every town and city put in, and they're under $40 million for what they put in. But here's the odd thing. We put in 371,000 based on our experience during the macro burst, always guess high. And we have the 18th largest claim in the state out of 169. So clearly there are going to be a lot of claims and needs for this money. And according to the feds, this money is supposed to go all to municipalities. How they spread it out is going to show the proof in the pudding here. Just for a little background on that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was an email that went out from the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities last week that said if you didn't put in enough money, that you can amend your claim. And that was odd that the membership association would say that and not the state. And so I asked him about that today when he said, after he said, well, he wasn't sure if you can carry it over or not. They haven't made that decision. So the follow-up question was, well, we got this email about amending our claim. Could we amend it? So then thereby increasing it and maybe saving more and holding on to more money. No, that he doesn't know why they sent that out, and he's, they've got a call into the Conference of Municipalities to say, why did you send that out? That's not true. So nobody, it's just a mess. So that's the COVID funding saga. Not much different than the last time we talked. Capital, that thing I just didn't want to lose track that we're still in progress. Mark had asked us about that a few months ago. Audit update, that we are working this week to get information to the portal, uploading the interim information. They'll be out here next week for 4 days with masks and socially distanced. They're only sending 2 people because of that. We're working with the outside sources to make sure we get that data. The pension and OPEB are the big things. The ones we control are in progress, and the ones that the state controls we received yesterday. And we're still anticipating that the field work will be done in mid-September. The economic recovery dashboard, we're working on that. And these are the things that we're thinking about that we would have in there. And we're certainly open to suggestions that with respect to revenues, what we really want to see is taxes, being the big one. And where do we stand for trending compared to the prior years? One of the things that we were concerned about is people could defer their taxes until October 1st. and how much cash would that take up. I think if everyone did it, we were talking about, I forgot the number now that we were talking about, but over $10 million, which is over our fund balance, our working capital, but only $370,000 or so of people applied and were approved to defer their taxes. And the application time is now done. But we'll look at the year-to-date collections. We've got, I think, 6 different graphs on taxes. We won't give you all of them. We'll just figure out which ones are most exciting. And the goal for that is that we would want it to be same as last year. And that information will come from Munis. Building department fees that I talked with them to see if there was anything that would be an indicator before the cash comes in that we could look at to kind of get a handle on where we might be trending. And no, when they file the building permit, they pay the cash at the same time. So that is the first and best indication that they would have. And then conveyance taxes, that could be high or low. It sounds like the real estate market is doing well, so maybe that's going to be higher. But that's another big item, but not too big. So those were the revenues that we were thinking that we would watch most closely. That with respect to, and by trending, we could see the month and against prior years. And that way it's more than we would see on a budget to actual. For expenditures, obviously we'd want to look at COVID costs. And the Board of Ed was happy to provide us any information that we need. And the things that we had talked about were because we had increased that this year and want to see where that is going. Transportation, both the number of students and the costs. The excess cost grant calculations, and then the substitute costs, and maybe something with the number, just get some history and some current data on long-term and short-term subs seems to be the best thing to look at there. EMS has given us some background information already for the number of calls that affects their revenue, that their calls are back up again. We were worried that they would stay down, but they're back up again. But we're pulling that information, and the personnel, that the extra shifts was the big cost there. HR professional fees, since I've been here, they've been here kind of all over the lot. That's legal fees for pensions, labor attorney, actuary, and then police overtime. Where is that trending? That because that's one of the biggest variables on the police budget. And then some economic indicators that COVID and the number of cases is obviously going to be important. That where do we stand, not necessarily just in Brookfield, but as the county, that the unemployment rates, that kind of gives us supply and demand, and number of governmental bond issuances. That just kind of is something, a prediction of the stability of the economy. Stock market volatility, whatever, index, and just measuring the confidence in the market. And then the interest rate spread between long-term treasury notes and short-term treasury notes. The farther that they are apart, the market is expecting growth and inflation and higher interest rates, and it's good. The closer they are is bad. We also looked at, could we use gross domestic product, new business starts, but any place we could find that data, it was so far behind that it really wasn't going to help us looking forward. That's what we're thinking. But again, we are open to any suggestions or anything that you think would be important to add or subtract. Any questions on any of that?
So basically, when we're looking at reimbursement, our best chance of reimbursement is going to be FEMA, correct?
I would say that's true.
The rest are ifs and best wishes, which are all good, but you wouldn't bet your paycheck on the rest of them other than little bits and pieces.
Yeah, I think the second most stable is the CRF fund, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, that the state has that 111 million. The small cities, I think, is a long shot, and the health is, it's small. It's not meaningful amount of money, but FEMA's number one.
Right,
And
but the other one,
and the education is secure.
Yeah, education.
74,000.
right. But the other one, the way you explained it, Steve, is once these municipalities catch on and they can go get money, Brookfield always seems to fall to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, the advantage we have there is we know how to track it better, and some towns and cities won't think some costs that are eligible. That's what I'm guessing. So I think we'll do all right there relatively, but I don't think, we're gonna blow it out of the water. I don't.
Right. I realize we are smarter and you guys are way ahead of the game because the macro burst and how you organize things. But the way it seems is the 371 we had to spend before June and receive before June. That money, if whatever we have, you're gonna obviously work that out with Marcia and put it in the pot, and we're gonna collect. But there's no guarantee we're gonna get approved for money in the second round of this.
No, and we don't have expenses up to 371 that we could put through.
Correct.
So,
that's what I'm saying. That's why that pocket might not grow to that big of a number.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yep. And everyone is talking that we need money for reopening the schools. We're obviously wealthier than some of the towns. I don't know how, I don't know who's got the money. Nobody has the money. I have no idea what's going to happen.
No, we don't. I agree with Mark. Okay.
All right. Any questions? All right. Hearing none. Report of the committees. Dan, do you have anything to add to the audit?
I do not have anything to add. I do have a question regarding the status of the corrective action plan, since Marcia and Ken are both on the phone and we dialogued about that. I was wondering if the template had been created and started to get populated so that we have that in good shape when the auditors show up.
Ken, can I ask you to handle that?
Sure. I will be doing that calculation as soon as we have finalized our numbers.
Okay, but the template's all ready to go?
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Old business, we have none. On to new business. I think we've all had a chance as a board to look at the tax collector suspense list. We promised Steve a vote on this. So any discussion we want to have before we put it to vote? No discussion? All right, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the tax collector suspense list as presented to us to move forward on. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, but we should specify what year it is.
2020, right, Marcia?
Yeah,
Year in 2020. Yes, year in 2020.
All right, so I'll amend my motion that we approve the tax collector suspense list for the year ending 2020.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. All right. Back to you, Marcia.
I have to say we have nothing for the iterative review because we're finalizing the books that We have that additional money that we think we're going to carry into the year, which is good. But we don't have the costs, a lot of the costs for reopening the schools. And we certainly don't have any data for the fiscal year 21 yet.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, though. We are meeting with John and Ken and anyone else that we need to once a week, so to keep this up to date and to understand where we are. John will talk about it a little bit more, but the Board of Ed will be meeting and coming up with their plan and what they think the costs are. They have to, I think, be back to the state by the 17th, but John can talk about that. But we're having very close communications on a weekly basis to keep track of this.
Okay. All right, back to you then, Marcia, on the interactive inter-budget department transfers.
Those are the ones that are summarized before, 3 additions to the lines I mentioned, and then a big addition to the transfers, just sucking out all the extra money in any account we could find. That and you should have received that on the 24th in an email from Ginny.
Can you put it up on the screen by chance?
I can.
Please.
I have everything waiting here to go on the screen. So this is what it looked like. That this is the column that we're looking for you. They're all negatives except for here is the technical consulting. That's the union negotiation thing we talked about. Pulling out money, pulling out money, pulling out money. That's all pulling out money. This is the volunteer firefighters awards. This is the COVID, everything else, pulling out money and putting it right there.
Okay. Any questions? So we need to make a motion to approve the department transfers as described in the attached inter-budget report prepared by Marcia Marion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we're on to the school technology purchase. Steve, you want to start us with that? Because you started the letter and you guys approved it last night.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen approved this. John Burrell had written us a letter on this as to what they needed. We had a meeting this morning with John and Eric to go over this with Ken. And I think the best way to do this, we decided, is allow Eric and John to walk you through where we've been, where we are now, and why we are requesting these funds. And I think they have a very good argument to give to you. So can we just move ahead right to that presentation and
Yes, sir.
detail? And I'll let John and Eric and Ken take over.
All right, thank you, Steve. Thanks for the invite.
That, John?
you
John, you
hear me?
okay with that?
Oh yeah, I'm all set. Yep.
Okay, good.
And you can hear me. Good. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for the invite, Board of Finance members. Thanks for having us this evening to share. And we'll move through this PowerPoint pretty swiftly and really have a conversation with you about the questions you may have. So we're happy to do that. And again, thanks for the opportunity. So before I actually start on the PowerPoint, just as a very brief reminder from not only from the memo, but from the Board of Selectmen meeting the other night, very brief. On Tuesday afternoon last week, the Connecticut State Department of Education and the governor put forth their state plan, which called for all students back to school 5 days a week. That was not something that any of the superintendents anticipated. So that's a real departure from what we were starting to plan for, just so everybody understands that. And then recently, as recent as yesterday, the governor pulled back from going to phase 3 to hold in phase 2. So, you know, these things are constantly changing. Having said that, not only are we to go to person to make a plan to go to in person 5 days a week, we also have to have a hybrid plan where we would basically, big picture, have half the students in and half the students out on distance learning. Of course, that would depend on public health data. And then if public health data continued to decline, if that was the case, we have to be ready for going back to full distance learning. And there's a lot involved in all of that. One caveat that's very important for everybody to understand: in the 5 days a week, 100% of the students back to school, that puts an extreme, the way it's worded from the governor, it puts an extreme strain on our system, because not only do we have to teach in person with the students in front of us, we also have to be prepared to teach students at home. Not only those students who unfortunately may have a medical situation where they would have documentation and we would educate them at home, but any student whose parent feels it's not appropriate for them to go back to school could just choose to have their child stay home, and we would have to educate them. So the strain you can imagine on our system to do something like that, and on all systems in the state to make that happen, is extreme, and we're working on those plans. So that's the big picture. I don't want to go any further because I know many of you have read the memo about the Chromebooks for students and the laptops for the faculty. So we just jump right into the presentation. And again, I thank you for the opportunity. So if we could go, Marcia, are you in charge of these slides? Let me try, or is it Dan?
Marcia.
I am.
Okay, thanks, Marcia. So yeah, so if you could go to that first slide that has the first text on it, we're talking about the Chromebooks. The one thing we need to talk about in the Chromebook purchase, Marcia alluded to the fact that the CARES Act funds apply to this Chromebook purchase. So that's number one. Number two, we have a one-to-one program and a bring your own device program for grade 8 to grade 12. So what we're talking about tonight is the Chromebook purchase of the 300 Chromebooks is for kindergarten through 7th grade. So we have converted from desktops in terms of the computer labs. Over the years, you all may recall computer labs were the rage. We now have the technology in device format that could be in carts that are much more readily and adaptively shared with the each classroom. And so we've moved to Chromebooks. And Eric will talk about the details of Chromebooks as you have more questions about that. What it's done is provide us more space because we do not have to have computer labs anymore. And that's needed space that is interrelated with special education and the programming that we need space for. And so that's evolved over the years. Carts between the classroom. Chromebooks are a much lower cost than iPads and can do more, frankly, in terms of the use we need, certainly easier to manage. Things that kids use Chromebooks for in the K through 7 area is our technology-based math program called ST Math, which stands for Spatial Temporal Math. Our McGraw-Hill program, Rosetta Stone, which is a language-based program. They use Chromebooks for writing, center work, extension work, research. There's a reading program called Lexia. I could go on, but they are using them all the time. They also use the Chromebooks scheduled. We schedule the Chromebooks for standardized assessment. And so whether we're in in-person mode or not, we need the Chromebooks. In distance learning or in a hybrid situation where students are at home working on this stuff, we have instruction through Zoom, and many of you who are parents are well aware of that situation and how that worked. Also students could access their Google Classroom and Google Suite. And also the Chromebooks are used for communication, whether that's via email or teachers getting in touch or whatever the case may be. So of course that depends on the developmental age of the child. So that's the big picture with what Chromebooks are used for and kind of some context for you. I'm going to turn it over to Eric now on the breakdown of the numbers, because what's really important tonight is that you understand our intentional planning, long-term and short-term, also our budget process and how we arrive at our figures. I think that's very important for the Board of Finance to understand. So Eric, please take it away. And Marcia, if you could move to the next slide.
Great, thank you. And thank you everybody for the opportunity to speak tonight. Second what John said earlier. So yes, the cost per Chromebook, we did do this through a public bid through our purchasing agent. And the lowest device cost price that we were looking for did come in at $256.20 per unit. And of course, you can see here that the CARES Act is reflected here that covers the majority of that cost, as you can see here. The device that was chosen at the price that it was chosen for is due to the fact that this model of Chromebook, the Dell 3100 that you may see referenced in the public bid, is specifically an education-based model. The device itself is made to withstand drops, bumps, abuse. It has a water-resistant keyboard, a tamper-resistant keyboard. They're made to stand up, more metal parts than plastic parts than what you would see in your consumer models. So, the device was picked because of the fact that it is a device model made for education and has proven that it can stand up in the education environment. Marcia, go ahead, please. As you can see here, we do purchase devices every year. And we did want to show here that, the history of the last 4 years of 2018 through what's being purchased in operating budget of this year. As you can see, the majority of the devices do end up at the high school one-to-one program. That is the primary upgrade. The new entering class that enters the one-to-one program gets the devices. And then we purchase, as many as we can that fit within the budget, whether we do bid or multiple quotes, or in some years we've actually done cooperative bidding with Ed Advance. So we've had multiple districts come together and do a big bid together to get the lowest price. So you can see here in 2019 is the year you can see that we started the one-to-one program in the 8th grade, which is why you see that device come up. And then each year we've been supplementing the one-to-one program on a continual basis, with the full support stuff coming in the 9th grade year. And then any devices after the one-to-one program is settled, go down to the K7. It's a model that's been working for in district instruction, but in our current environment, we are seeing obviously a need for more devices, more support, more, and we're also seeing our students just frankly use the devices for more, whether they're sitting at a desk inside of the classroom or they're at home. And I did want to point here, I did put a note here that the model of Chromebook we bought in the year-end 2020 was a Hewlett-Packard HPG6, and it had a known issue. And so we worked very hard with Hewlett-Packard, made an agreement to extend some warranties. And that was actually a group effort among many school districts in Fairfield County that all had the same issue. But we had made the decision that, the Chromebooks, with the issues that they had, we saw less of them if they weren't part of the one-to-one program. So we did purposely remove the HP model from the one-to-one program and put that down in the lower grades because the devices last longer. And the reason why I bring that up is I wanted to note that in year-end 2020, I have 350 Chromebooks marked for the one-to-one program, which is about double of that enrollment of one grade that year. So I did want to note that is why in year end 2020, there is an extra 100 devices over the other 3 years. So next slide, please, Marcia. And some numbers for you. The number that you see in front of you here for K7 students is our projected enrollment for the 2021 school year. And that is below you is a 600 is our count of devices used in K7 currently. And with a total number of Chromebooks in district being 1,630. The reason why we are looking to supplement and add these devices to support the elementary level are the reasons you see here. There are some units that are well beyond their usable life, whether that's from the manufacturer or from Google's recommendation. And we have used them so much that our technician at Huckleberry has done an amazing job with duct tape. And we are holding them together. But I could not see handing those out to families who needed distance learning. So we need to replace ones that are just far too broken to send home. We're also anticipating students may not be able to share the devices the same way they were with carts rolling classroom to classroom. There may be cleaning windows and sanitizing windows that we have to fulfill before devices are needed. And of course, at a moment's notice, we need to be prepared for distance learning to return. Next slide, please, Marcia. And I think we wanted to just do one set of devices at a time, so I'll stop here on Chromebooks.
Okay, questions, anybody?
Not yet. I have questions, but I want to throw it.
I'll jump a few in here. So basically, we've gone down from a cost of $264 in total down to a cost of $150.
That is correct.
So we went from 300, 400, all over the place. And I guess this is where my confusion jumps in on how we're handling this whole process. And this is where I get lost on approving things of, we get a letter dated July 7th saying we need $264,000. We all sit around a table and talk about it. And it really comes down to a $150,000 number. It's like, when can we get validity in numbers? I mean, why do we have 400 on there when we need 300 on there? Why didn't we also know that the grant could be used 70-something thousand towards a $76,000 number? We started questioning this today when I got the letter, and Steve and everybody questioned this, and there's $100,000 in lesson costs.
So I don't, if I could just jump in here, we have to approve the gross amount of the expenditures, which would be the 150 and the 77 or whatever it is for 225. Because the expenditure budget, we have to approve the whole thing. So although the net cost is shown here, when you approve it, it's got to be the gross cost, just the way.
So we still went from 264 down to 225, and we got a letter saying, again, 264, and none of us got a letter explaining the breakdown that this is really down to 150. And all of these things were being asked to approve and to review prior to this. None of us got the full story. A plus B is C and the real needs. We get a letter saying we need 300 laptops. We get a letter saying we need 400 Chromebooks. And when we push a little bit back and come down to the nuts and the tacks of this thing, now we find out really the cost for if you want to just say the Chromebooks is $2,000 to the town. Am I missing something? I guess I don't understand how these numbers jump around like they do. This is my concern sitting here is, when we go to reopen this school and we're doing it by piecemeal and we're taking these small pockets of, we need this technology, we got to buy 400 and 300, now we get it down here. It's hard to approve bits and pieces when we don't see the big picture of what we're looking at. And in just this case, we jumped 33% less in costs. But I guess I'm lost, so help me, please.
Yeah, no, so the first thing I say is, and I let Steve and Marcia jump in on this because they provided the direct communication, or Jerry did, so I can't, the communications you're talking about, Glenn, I'll be very honest, I'm not sure what those communications are. I wasn't a part of those communications to the Board of Finance, so I'd ask.
John, your letter said you needed 400 Chromebooks. We're only asking for 300 now. So this is where I get frustrated, is in.
Understood.
What do we need? Because there's a big difference between 400 and 300, and then we got this change in 3 hours.
Sure. So we could explain that, but in terms of what, you were mentioning some memos outside of mine that I just can't speak to because I don't know, but I'll let Eric talk about the 300 and the 400 and talk to you how that works. Please, Eric, explain that.
Yeah, so I do want to cover the 300 versus the 400. So when we do these bids, we generally, because the vendors all want to compete with each other, right? We generally get them to bid their absolute lowest price. And excuse me. And in recent weeks and months, every time we refresh a new quote or we ask for a new quote on devices, they're all going up. Supply and demand, factories shutting down around the world and they can't produce them as quickly. Number of reasons I'm being told by vendors. issues with delivery windows, all that stuff. So the bid was purposely done for 300 to up to 400 Chromebooks. What this does and why I kind of do this is this gives a buffer that if there is, absolute incredible pricing on the Chromebooks, and I was given a number to say I can spend $100,000. Most of the time, these vendors, when they award a bid, they have to stick to the number that they get. So if we only ask for 300 and then had an opportunity to buy another 50, let's say, we would have to get a refreshed quote and they couldn't honor that pricing. So we did originally ask for between 3 and up to 400. I can't speak to the rest of the CARES Act part of it, but when the CARES Act information came out, and based on what we were getting, that's what led us, at least my suggestion, to lean back towards and sticking down to the 300 Chromebooks. And so that's kind of, it was purposely put into the bid for up to 400 so that we have the option with the best possible pricing if we're able to buy more.
Which I respect the explanation, but again, we got the request for 400. The number we got to approve tonight included the 400. And I'm saying it shouldn't come to us to approval until we get the numbers correct. We shouldn't be backtracking on numbers at this stage of approval. We should be like, I'm buying 300. This is the cost of 300. We got a letter today saying we're to approve $264,000 to include 400. And if the intent all along was to purchase, after you found out your information, Eric, if the intent was to purchase 300, our cover letter should have said we're buying 300 Chromebooks, and here's the dollar figure. We shouldn't be backtracking. This is where I get lost in validity and numbers that comes from the school side sometimes of what are we doing? I mean, we get a cover letter that clearly states 300 laptops, which I still don't understand 300 when we only put 276 out the bid and we have 230 teachers. So we're going to go to that number later because the validity of the numbers don't make any sense to me. But on this case alone, Eric, I totally respect your knowledge. I totally respect what you did. But for us to get to the approval stage, I really think it should have said 300 Chromebooks. And then we should have had the explanation of the $75,000 CARES Act. It shouldn't have come out at this late of this stage for us to be voting on this. And my concern is going forward on all these school opening processes is we're going to put a number out of 800,000, then we're going to find a number's 400,000. And we're going to put out, I'm just using numbers. I'm not saying anything. And we're going to be approving numbers. And then we're going to find out the number. We knew the number was lower. This number was lower from the start. So I guess there's my piece on that. On the other Chromebooks, I have a question about. On the high school, I believe we charge the students or the parents of the students a fee to use the Chromebooks. I don't understand it. And that I realize that's a Board of Ed thing, and I appreciate that and respect that too. But on these now, we're not going to present that same type of program on these type of Chromebooks. So there's not going to be a backflow back in on the backside of revenue. And then I would say, if I'm a high school parent, why am I paying the 50 or $100 and the other students are not getting it? Is there a thought process behind that?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, the number of Chromebooks being requested does not get us anywhere near the ability to run a one-to-one program for all of these grades. We would need a lot more, to cover the enrollment of the students. So we simply don't have enough to do a one-to-one program at these levels. The difference is, and I'd be happy to point anybody in the direction of our policy and agreement that parents fill out for the program that has been running for some time now. The difference is in the one-to-one program, the device for $50 a year or the price of the device up front, it makes it the student's device. They can do with it what they please, as long as they take care of it, which doesn't always happen. But the students are able to take the device home, take it from class to class with them, take it, wherever they'd like to take it with them. What they do is if they pay upfront for the device, they get to keep it for all 4 years. If they pay $50 a year, they return it to us in the summer. We give it back to them in the fall, fixed up, cleaned up. And based on the cost of the devices over the time, with depreciation and over the time that the students pay into the program, they actually get to take the Chromebook with them when they graduate. These devices would not sit with an individual student. The only exception to that is distance learning, where back in March, we had to do something to get a distance learning program going. We had to give families devices, and we had to be able to ensure that we could get as many people to learn for the last 3.5 months of school as possible. These devices would simply supplement and support a distance learning. But should we be in school, these Chromebooks will stay in classrooms, or they will be in carts, or they will be safely maintained and held in some way or manner by the technology department.
Okay. So basically, if we go to school regularly, like as much regularly as possible, I mean, regular is probably a poor term to use now.
Yeah, understood.
I appreciate that. Is this then would become basically one of your terms is an investment to better enhance the school thing. This would fall into from a need, like not a true, it is a need. I'm not going to argue that, but not a true need. But this falls into that investment to enhance the learning environment in the school classroom. Correct?
That's a great way to put it.
Absolutely, Glenn. And the other piece to that is Eric used an important word, supplement. And that's how we get into the situation where we're able to use the CARES Act, because that money cannot supplant needed have-to programming. It's for supplementation. So in equity. So it falls in line perfectly with that, with the requirements of the grant.
All right. Any other questions on the Chromebook from the Board of Finance?
I have just like a couple of questions for Eric. How many let's just say, how many laptops / Chromebooks do we order every year? Maybe Chromebooks. Do we have like a set amount that we're ordering every year?
So Marcia, could you go back to this one? Yeah. So the numbers said here, so excuse me, it does fluctuate. Obviously the last 2 years have been stuck at 50, but the number does fluctuate based on, frankly, changing cost of the devices, and where we're able to budget elsewhere. So, for example, there's years I'm able to put more money in towards Chromebooks and years I'm able to. There's also years where, for example, the year I got 530, I had put in a dollar figure based on, I can't remember back now, but I put it on based on X number of dollars per Chromebook back in October. And in March, Ed Advance, as I referenced before, decided to do a cooperative bid with all 7 or 8 school districts that they manage. And the pricing was just so absolutely incredible that we were able to fit more within the budget that I had budgeted for. And in the long run, ended up supporting even down to the elementary schools. Over time, did supplement the elementary schools immensely as the devices kind of trickled down, and really started to support programs, especially like our ST Math. So this is so the budget year, guys, we did budget and purchase and are working on purchasing 450, out of my operating budget this year.
So my other question is, with the amount that you order each year, would it be prudent to reach out to Dell themselves and say, we purchase X amount every year, then you're going direct to the manufacturer versus cutting out the middleman who's probably putting a percentage, whatever that percentage is, on top? Would you be able to get to a better discount, B, going straight to the manufacturer, and then C, maybe, say, look, you have 200 Chromebooks that I'm going to order every year. So can we start a relationship that way, going direct to the manufacturer? Just my own personal knowledge.
It's an option, and I do, and I have. It doesn't necessarily always work out that way. Sometimes there's a very competitive market in technology purchasing, where if 3 vendors are trying to get one model of Chromebook, and all 3 vendors try to contact the manufacturer, it's a first come, first serve. The first one that does it will get the best pricing. And sometimes to partner with other vendors, they give the best pricing to a third party partner. I will tell you that the reason why it was done this way is because of the cost and the threshold we hit of the cost of these devices, we did do this as a public bid, per town policy for bidding requirements, right? Anything over $20,000. So Dell, HP Direct, all these companies did have the opportunity to bid, just as all the ones who did submit a bid. I will tell you some vendors were a little bit concerned, but we were very lax on it about, being able to deliver them in time, which was a concern for quite some time. But when a vendor like the one that won our bid reached out to Dell, Dell then became very well aware that this bid was out there. And if I had to guess, most likely would not submit a bid and did not want to compete directly with one of their resellers. Which is another thing that happens with these technology purchases. They have like non-compete clauses. Okay. But they did have the same opportunity as everybody else. And Jerry really worked hard to reach out to vendors and get that information out there and share any resources, and keep it even and even across the playing field for all vendors involved.
Okay, and my final question would be real quick. I noticed that of all the bids that were out there, some had asterisks next to them. I think it was number 3 and 7, I could be wrong, that said licensing or something was included within the cost. Do we anticipate that top bid that you got to add on additional licensing or costs?
So yes. So what a lot of people who don't realize, and I had to learn along my way as well, was that you purchase a Chromebook and whatever price you see online or anything like that is the price. Education, well, actually, frankly, any business that is a Google district or a Google business, it is almost mandatory. It's extremely beneficial to purchase a Google Chrome management license. What that does is it allows us to take the Chromebook and enroll it in an administrator console that gives us full control over the Chromebook. And we can do this with every Chromebook. For example, we can go in and I can flip a switch and shut the camera off on every Chromebook. So if we don't want kids using cameras, which obviously right now we do want them using cameras, we can turn that off and on. And that's just an example. So in conversation, so one thing we do is before we award the bid, we did this with a few companies, Jerry, myself, and Mr. Post, we actually meet with the vendors, and we, the top 2 or the top 3. In that conversation, the winning bidder there, Imperium at $256.20 in our conversation, actually realized that she left that license out of the bid, which was a requirement of the bid. And so I actually have an email from her that because of that, they as a company are going to absorb that cost and keep the device cost to us at $256.20. It is a benefit to the district. They felt horrible about it, but it is a cost benefit to the district. So no, that number will stick.
Thank you so much for answering all those questions.
Yep.
So I have a question on both on both of them. This on the laptops, but it's in general about the timing. I agree with Glenn that ideally, there'd be a fulsome plan, reopening plan, and with one number with the breakdowns, and we'd do it once. I'm guessing that the reason we're bidding on these before there's a full plan in place is lead time reasons.
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct, Dan. Just to fill you in, I don't want to go too much detail, but what we actually did try to lock vendors down to a specific delivery window if possible, and it's very, very hard to meet. So yes, we do need that lead time. Yeah,
that's what I figured. So aside from these purchases, would you expect to have as complete a plan as possible? Obviously, things are going to change constantly, but the next appropriation or the next approvals or whatever would be part of a broad plan that presents the entire strategy.
Absolutely, Dan. We're going to have as close of an estimate as we can for the board meeting on the 15th, which is next week.
Yep.
But it's important for perspective, so you know, because I know questions come up about timing. We were not anticipating the governor and the commissioner's plan until July 6th, and it was put out a week earlier, which was just a week ago. And we're making adjustments. There's significant changes to the requirements that have saved what we anticipated as what would be significant costs. So just for a brief example, there was a requirement when the summer school requirements came out in May, as we were preparing for summer school and extended school year for our students, that every bus would have to have a bus monitor on it. And so as we anticipated that would be the fall plan as well. And just that cost alone, Mr. Post worked on that, would cost us $500,000 as a town. As you know, there was also the 12 students on a bus and some other things. And those key things have been significantly relaxed or not required at all. So those are things we're not going to even be coming to you with. Temperature takers, when you actually enter a building or enter the bus, that has been dropped as a requirement because of the false positives. So as the public health requirements change, it changes the school plan from the State Department of Education, which really helps us out. There's two big areas, Dan, to answer your question, that we're still in flux and we're trying to figure out. And we're meeting with our principals on Monday. They're in training this week, and then they'll be back as the district team continues to work on the plan this week, is custodial cleaning services type costs, and looking at the requirements, what's been relaxed, what hasn't been relaxed, what we're required to do. So we're actually having a meeting tomorrow morning to really tighten up and try to get very firm on that. On initial, I'm not going to put out any public figures here, but initially there was some significant costs, very significant. So we are looking at ways to be flexible, efficient, and still meet the requirements and build, as the state commissioner talks about, consumer confidence. So faculty, staff, and students and families are comfortable coming back to school. The other is the need for social distancing. While 6 feet is the number we always hear about, the 6 feet social distancing, with the smaller children, the American Academy of Pediatrics is talking about 3 to 6 feet. That's a significant difference when we start to look at all students being in a school. How can we spread them out in a safe way? The other piece we're looking at with that is we have a survey out to parents, and that survey right now indicates that about 80% of our parents would send their children back to school this fall, whereas 20% would not. So those are all variables and factors. And frankly, just with the governor's decision to hold back on phase 3 yesterday, we all know that not even weekly, but daily and sometimes hourly, things continue to change. So we're trying to get that in place. Long answer to your question. I apologize for that, but I wanted to be thorough for you.
Not at all. I appreciate that. And just following up as we move forward in this process and the reopening committee, which I know there's a couple of representatives of our board on that, which I think is great. That said, you know, the expenses that for approval are going to be great. And I don't think anybody on the Board of Finance wants to have any input in what that reopening procedure is, but in the financing of it, it's going to be pretty detailed, I'm sure, and a big number. So I would just request, you know, as much lead time for us as possible, getting that big and detail. So getting, you know, the whole plan on a Tuesday for approval on a Wednesday with changes in the middle is just not something that'll be possible. So we need lead time for the approval as well. So factor that into the timeline.
Very fair point, and we will do our best on that.
Great, thanks.
If we're ready to move on to laptops, we can certainly talk about that.
Yep, please do.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Whenever you're ready, Mark.
Mark is trying to talk and he's on mute.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Marcia. Can you go back to page 5, Marcia? On the Chromebooks? Thank you. So I have a couple of items. First, Dr. Briel and Eric, thank you for the presentation and joining us. And Dr. Ruby and all of you, Ken Post. Dr. Briel, you mentioned a 20% decline in students currently from the survey. Will you keep us upgraded and make us aware of how that comes in when you have all the results in?
Yeah, so right now, that's where we're holding right now. It's 19 or 20%. I didn't check it. It closed on Monday, so that's
Yep.
the number.
Right. But I imagine that'll be less transportation, potentially less teachers.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be.
Lots of things.
Yeah, where it impacts, we'll let you know.
Yep.
With transportation, that's another thing. I'm glad you mentioned it, Mark, just to go back to Dan's question.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, they do not have hard and fast rules on you do your best with social distancing on the bus. We're also working with parents. 59% of parents say that they would have their children utilize the transportation. And so that means 40% would not. The state is actually encouraging superintendents to encourage parents when we begin the school year and have students coming to school to encourage them to, if they can, provide transportation for exactly that reason. So we're in a situation where, again, talking about those summer school initial rules were extremely restrictive. With 12 students on a bus that could typically fit 70, we all know there's not enough drivers and buses, even if we had all the money in the world to make that work. So that has been relaxed. You have to wear masks on the bus, et cetera. So those are all the kinds of things that will be impacted. One thing I will tell you, Mark, and you'll get this as a parent in the district, once the final plan, which needs to be submitted to the state on July 24th, which is about 2.5 weeks away, we're going to hold a special meeting likely that week prior to that for the Board of Education to approve the plan. Once that plan is submitted to the state, it will be distributed to the community, and another survey will go out to parents because they need to see the real plan and know what the painted picture is of what the school day is going to look like. So then they can make that decision. Am I comfortable sending my child or not? That may change our numbers significantly, and we certainly share those as public numbers.
Great, thank you. And I realize many of the numbers are going to go up, but if we have a few areas like transportation or whatever that we can save, it's great to know that stuff too. So I appreciate you're going to keep us apprised of that. In that context, I'll skip to my point of year-end 2019 on this screen. Eric, you bought 530 Chromebooks.
Yes.
And you said because you had an allotted amount of money to buy however many Chromebooks you had proposed buying that year, the price came down. So instead of giving the money back to the taxpayers or not spending it, you just spent it on more Chromebooks. Did you have authorization from someone to do that? Did you make that determination? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm trying to figure out how we arrived at the methodology to just spend more money and buy more Chromebooks than we said we needed when you got your budget passed by the Board of Finance.
Sure. There was, as you can see, we ended up doing that in the 8th grade. We used that opportunity. There was a lot of interest for years, well, even before I got here, to expand the one-to-one program to the 8th grade. There's even more interest to expand it beyond. And so we use this opportunity to do exactly that. So now, when I first got here and we went on, the one-to-one program was grades 9 through 12. And so now, as you see, starting in year-end 2019, we were able to bring that one-to-one program down to the 8th grade, but it did require 2 classes worth of Chromebooks versus 1.
My question was the methodology.
There is a methodology when Eric would put in the purchase order, and then it goes through an approval process that involves Jerry and Ken. And I don't know if John has to approve something at that level or how.
We also, it wasn't just that we magically went to the 8th grade. We brought this to the Board of Education and had a conversation with them about it.
And the principal of Wiskaneer was involved in this as well.
Mm-hmm. The CARES Act, you're talking, we've got 74,000 that can be spent towards these Chromebooks. Does that preclude that 74,000 being spent on something else? Or are they saying 74,000 will be spent on the Chromebooks? We'll give you more for there was a list Dr. Brio read off to us of stuff it could be used for. So are we using it all up to do this?
Yes, and this could be used to supplement, and this is, as we talked about earlier, and we could go on for hours about what the Chromebooks are used for. I tried to keep it very brief tonight.
You did. I appreciate it.
So it really helps with learning in general, and again, it's to supplement. Anything we purchase with that CARES money has to be to supplement. It's not.
But this would use up all of that CARES money, so you wouldn't have any to go for anything else in those categories you were able to use it for.
Correct, and part of this is the requirement from the governor that we must be prepared for all 3 models of learning: in person, hybrid,
Understood.
supplemental.
No, I understood it's a proper use for it.
Yeah.
I'm just getting clear in my head that we're using up the money and it won't be available for the other things.
And we also receive, it's important to be very transparent here, and I know the Board of Finance always likes to know and have a bit of a lead time. And I can't give you all the details on this because we just received a memo very late this afternoon from the State Department of Education Finance Department on some options and requirements with this particular grant. As you all may know, there's been some controversy from the State Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, about the CARES Act and using it for non-public schools. And our non-public school would be Christian Life Academy. And so in our very quick calculations, and we have to confirm all of this, they would get some of that $74,000, perhaps up to $2,000. Wouldn't be a significant amount of grant, but that is something we have to work on, that calculation. We will be calling the state probably tomorrow to see if we can get some clarity from them on that. But to Marcia's comments earlier, sometimes they don't have the answers for you.
I understand that completely. Thank you for the transparency on it. My final question, I look at budget year end 2021 and we're buying 450 Chromebooks. You now want approval for 300 Chromebooks. Where do those 300 Chromebooks fall into that year end 2021 number? Are those part of the 450?
No. So that would actually be above and beyond this.
750.
The point of this, the point of this spreadsheet was to show past and current purchases under operating. So this would go above and beyond. So add 300 to the 450 you see there for 750.
Wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Yep. Nope. Thanks for clarifying.
Yep. That is all I have.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Marcia, if you're ready, we can go to the next slide and we'll get into laptops now. So in a typical in-person environment, use of laptops by the...
Oh, wait a minute. Let's go backwards. Let's go backwards one time, please. Go back 2 slides. This isn't, no, not down one. Down one more. These numbers now don't make sense to me because we're buying 750 Chromebooks. Go back up to the count of Chromebooks. I'm lost on the numbers now. No, keep going down towards the laptop screen.
Page 6, Marcia.
Glenn, so 450 is the number of Chromebooks that were originally budgeted for in my operating budget back in October that was approved under the current operating budget.
Yes.
So this request of 300 is above that.
So 750.
Yes, that is correct.
So how many are we going to have now in total? If we're adding 750 this year, what is the total number of Chromebooks we're going to own as a district right now?
So I would take that number. I can tell you that of these 300, 100 Chromebooks will be used to directly replace ones that should have been removed 2 or 3 years ago. So add 1630 plus another 650. That would bring us to approximately 2,200 Chromebooks. And again, some of those which that are currently in, we do have a stock of the 100 that are well beyond their usable life. But also note that we have other purchases that were made years ago that those devices are getting near the end of their life as well. So we'll have 22 devices for the start of fiscal year 2021, and then at the end of next year we may have to look at disposing of some devices that are well beyond their usable life.
And then what is our total enrollment?
2,680.
Okay.
Projected.
So 400 shy of having a Chromebook for every kid.
Yes.
We're getting there. Yeah, yeah.
And how many districts have Chromebooks for every child in the district?
I can't.
I'll look at you, Eric.
I can tell you that number. I can tell you that number is small. I don't have that number. I'd be happy to talk to my tech colleagues around the state and find out.
I'm willing to bet that number is extremely small. How's that? All I'm trying to get a point is we as a Board of Finance get told we're not helping the schools progress. We're not helping the schools progress. But yet we are progressing in these small ways of every student has a Chromebook. We have almost amount of Chromebooks per student, and we're ahead of districts in some of these areas. This is a big number. And again, why were we asking for 400? We go back to Eric. I get your logic, but now we're going for 400. We're going above and beyond these numbers. And my fear, I'm going to circle back to my fear is, John, you say we got big numbers coming, cleaning schools. We got big numbers coming. We got to define these numbers and get them down to real numbers. Because if we inflate every number going forward, we're going to have an inflated balloon at the end of this that we can't cash the check. We've agreed to cover these costs. We've agreed as a board and with the Board of Selectmen to cover costs. But when we're looking at, we're buying 750 Chromebooks. And then I'm saying to myself, why did the quote go out for 750 and go for volume? If we're going for 400, we're doubling our volume. Where is the tracing of what we're doing, the logic behind what we're doing, and putting forth the big number? Because if you had 450, we're buying 750. I guess we're not using volume. We're not using, you were looking for volume on 400. The volume on 750 has got to be greater than the volume on 400. Am I missing something? Because I'm getting, as we dive deeper into these numbers, it makes less sense to me.
Glenn, that price that you see in the bid was honored for the additional 450.
So what number did you put in for the 450 into the budget per unit?
400. What did I put into the budget? 260. I put in $260 a device, and these came in at 256.
Okay, so you're on the number.
I am on that number, yes.
Okay.
Glenn, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Dr. Burrell, if 20% of kids learn, I don't remember the survey. I saw it. My wife filled it out. I'm not even sure what our answers were. But if 20% of the students don't come and learn in school, do we know what percentage of that are pulling their kids out of the school system and homeschooling them?
Well, with the option that the governor has put on the table that the school is responsible for educating them at home, I think that number, while always very low, students getting homeschooled, will stay very low because it just defies logic. Why would you not have the school if they, by law, have to provide an education?
Well,
keep them at home and have them provide it.
As much as a great job as you guys did in a hurried situation of putting a distance learning program together, it was not flawless.
Correct.
Not to anybody's fault. You guys did great. I'm not putting that down, but some parents won't see that that was, not anyone's fault. And I would guess the number of homeschooled students would go up, but your survey didn't ask that, is I guess what I'm asking.
No, it did not.
Can we try to get that into your survey after our July 24th?
Well, what I would tell you, Mark, it's very difficult to get that answer. The many times they have no obligation to communicate with us, parents of children who decide to homeschool them. Dr. Ruby writes letters and so forth, and sometimes there's no communication back. Sometimes there's, please don't bother me again. It's very rare that we get full communication from them.
Thank you. I'm talking about the survey that goes out to the parents, like the last one did. You're going to put another survey out after the July 24th mandate.
Correct.
If you could, I would appreciate, maybe you can't, I would ask that you try to ask to get a feeling if some of them are going to withdraw from the school system completely.
I will take that under consideration.
Thank you.
As we develop the survey.
So basically what we've just talked about is there's 3 buckets of classifications now for our students. First bucket is parents are going to allow their children as we're going back to school model. This is the back to school model. 80% of the parents have gotten back to you and said, hey, we're going to let our kids go to school. We're going to try to be, like I say, as normal as possible. 20%, out of that 20% bucket that aren't coming back to school, there could be a percentage that are saying, we still want to remain in the school system, but we're not sending our children to school. The Brookfield is responsible to teach them through distance learning. And then we're going to have a percentage that's going to totally drop out of the district and homeschool by themselves. Am I missing something?
That is correct, Glenn. The one thing you need to know is we had a very nice turnout response, of the survey. Only it was around 1,600 survey responses. It was not 100% of the families that attend our schools.
So me as a parent, if I decide not to send my child to school, do we have to supply them with Chromebooks at home, and do we have to supply them, or is that a decision on the parent? Because now you're talking 200 less Chromebooks in the system or whatever. I mean, what are our legal responsibilities on that aspect?
That is still being worked out around the state. In fact, there was a legal seminar where one of the lawyers was questioning the governor's authority to mandate that districts provide the in-person model and also have to provide distance learning for those children whose parents choose to stay home, not for medical reasons or things like that. So that's another one of those things that's out there and it's still in debate. But right now, based on the governor's order, we have to plan for that.
I have some more fun with numbers questions now. In terms of numbers of students versus numbers of laptops. And that question, how many high school students don't use a Chromebook and use their own device?
About 20%. That number has stuck every year for the last 4 years. It's been about 80% participate in the one-to-one, 20% BYOD.
So about 200 kids approximately?
Yeah, yes.
So that means we're really only 200 Chromebooks away from one device per one student.
There's
400, 200 don't need
want to bring their own, Dan, if you take those kids out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So also sorry, Dan, but most of the kids now, certainly the younger year ones, scrambled to get some sort of laptop or Chromebook, or mine have iPads, and many of them will continue to use their own devices also.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan, continue.
No, I think that's exactly right. I didn't even consider that because my kids have graduated from that. But so if we're gonna overbuy potentially, and will that reduce the budget of needed Chromebooks in the following fiscal year? That to get back to
the has to, Dan, by logic. You can't buy 450 when you only have 100 in attrition. It should go down to 100 every year going forward. So that budget should shrink from $115,000 down to $25,000 by nature, because you're only replacing 100. Or maybe you have, because you increase the number of Chromebooks, the percentage of replacement might go to 12% or 13% or whatever it is, instead of the 10% that you're at.
And that's actually a discussion that Eric, Ken, and I had with Marcia and Steve. We've been talking about that, what the future is going to look like.
Good. So in our iterative budgeting process during the course of this fiscal year, that's something that we'll pay attention to.
Absolutely.
Good.
All right, let's get the laptops then.
All right. So again, in a normal, typical in-person environment, what are the laptops used for? The teachers use these laptops as well as administrators because we don't purchase desktops for them. They use their laptops. They're mobile in the buildings for different meetings. They bring them home, and that's their computer. Daily communication of all kinds, classroom presentations and grading, attendance, and all kinds of record keeping, and of course the curriculum work they do in their professional learning communities and the work they do to continuously improve and plan their lessons. With distance learning or hybrid learning, something that's different, it goes back to something Mark talked about, that our approach at a moment's notice to go to distance learning was not flawless, and we absolutely are aware of that and reflect it greatly. One of the things that we're focusing on this summer as part of our distance learning plan and option scenario is that we need to move to a more synchronous learning schedule through Zoom or Google Meet, where there's a defined schedule and so forth. And there's also a discussion about how we could involve live instruction as well as part of that. Managing the Google Classroom suite, developing distance learning plans, of course, and communicating with parents and families. So that's the base use of the laptops. And the laptops, Eric will go through the finances, the age, and the same kind of attrition and replacement discussion with the Chromebooks.
John, Dr. Brill, if I may, I just want to be clear. While there were hiccups, I'm not blaming you guys. I think everybody on the education side did a spectacular job, and it's no one's fault that there were hiccups.
Mark, I
don't want to dwell on that.
If that came across as defensive, I want you to know it was more honest. Believe me, we know it wasn't perfect, and we want to be the best we can be. And it would be nice to focus on one thing rather than have to make so many different plans.
Do not envy you guys.
And then the changing expectations. So we're really in a very difficult situation. And again, like I've said in a couple of my emails that I forwarded to the different boards to keep you apprised of what's going on, we really do appreciate the support. I mean, this is, sometimes we have some difficult conversations and we understand that, but you know, we're moving forward with the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and we continue to evolve our district, and it's appreciated. We want you to know that. So thank you. Eric, please.
Okay. Yeah. So you see here the number is 276. I'll just preface. I know this will probably come up as another question later. I apologize for where the number 300 got put into play, because I will tell you the public bid, that we did do through Mr. Gay, our purchasing agent, did only ask for 276. This was not an opportunity where we saw the opportunity to purchase more. In the same way that we handled the Chromebooks, this does account for one device for every certified staff and administration. So the number is solid at 276. And that is based on employee counts from our human resources department, along with cross checks with my own technology department, and various resources to make sure that we got to 276 certified staff.
So how many certified staff do we have in total?
Yeah, that's later, but we can get to that.
Go ahead.
So we can go there. Go ahead, Eric. You can walk them through.
Yep. So here's your breakthrough of teachers in school district by school and total, and then there's our administrators again by school and by total, and then the last row includes we had a majority of our TSO staff works on laptops, has laptops for various needs for them, but we do have a set group that does not. And would need them for the ability to work from home and support the district on a regular basis. I also did request 6 backup spare devices. What that is if a staff member comes in and has an issue in the first year and we need to put a warranty claim in, we have a device to immediately hand back to the teacher and gives them 0 downtime. So
Eric, before you get too much farther, so basically you're telling me we haven't bought a computer for any staff member in the schools for the past 4 years, that there's been 0 computers bought for anybody, because I looked at your list. You have 231 teachers listed in the budget. You're here, you got 12 people outside. So we got 20 teachers. I don't know where they came from.
Well, they're
not in the budget. These 20 teachers aren't in the budget. So how we get to these numbers of 93, 91, 50, and 30 when you only list 231 on the roster?
I do have this does also include our PT and OT. They are certified and they work directly with students, physical therapy and occupational therapy.
That number's 12 in the budget. So now I'm at 243.
Our behavior BCBA, I can never remember what the full acronym is. Among a few others, I do have and I did share and would be happy to share if needed. I do have an Excel spreadsheet that not only has this exact graphic on it, but a list of individuals by name that was produced when we did this initial request.
Right, but I'll go back to
there it is. Yep.
There is no computers then in the whole district that are usable, because I've never seen a company ever in my life not buy computers as employees have come on, not change it, where every one of these computers none of them are usable, basically, because we're buying for every certified staff member in one shot here.
Yeah, no, why don't we go back?
You can't have many more employees, Dr. Burrell. There can't be many.
Glenn, you jumped ahead in the presentation. If we walk you through it, we can go through all this with you. So
okay.
We can answer this part now, or we could go back through, because you'll understand that the 4-year-old laptops in general, we are going to repurpose those to the staff that don't have laptops so they could be able to work from home, because we robbed the students to have a Chromebook opportunity in the distance learning model in the spring, so we could have staff work from home who didn't have machines at home. So, that they could use devices that were school property and so forth. So there's a story. And so we could walk through that however you want to walk through that.
Glenn, could we let them do their presentation maybe?
Go ahead.
So yes, again, you saw the list. We can pull that up again. We do have it covering certified staff and administration. So here's what I was about to explain was the reasoning behind that. Marcia, if you can go to the next slide. Yep. So you do see here, this does account for full device refreshes. And you can see the dates that are here. This does not account for, Glenn, you made a very good point about what about onboarding of folks? What about, situations that warrant that we've had to purchase, small quantities of devices to cover that. I will tell you that 99% of the time, unless the device is broken, the only time we really need, new devices is to fix anything that's broke, is to replace anything that's broken beyond repair, or if we add staff members in our budget, right? But 99% of the time, what ends up happening is English teacher A leaves the district, turns in their laptop, and it is immediately given to English teacher B. So the devices are not the teachers; they're not their devices. It is the position's laptop, and so a lot of the times the devices are, the devices given back to us and then given back out to that replacement staff member. Go ahead, John.
No, Eric, if you could just briefly let them know about our inventory system so they understand the control we have of the machines of our property.
Yeah, sure. We do have a full asset inventory management system. It is really meant for education. It's based on our library management system, and what it does is it keeps accurate track of any and all device we have in the district, using barcodes and serial numbers. And it also allows us to record depreciation and device value. No device leaves the technology department's hands without being scanned and checked out, as the system calls it, checked out to a staff member, so we know at all times who has the device and where it is. And that's not just for staff, that includes our student Chromebooks as well. And it even includes our desktop computers that, even though they don't travel, we need to account for the fact that we have them in the district. So we do have a full system for that.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure they understood that we track and how seriously we take that.
So,
yeah, a device doesn't go anywhere without us knowing about it.
That I appreciate. I understand. I'm not saying anybody's stealing them. So we're going through your storyline here, and I'll follow your storyline. It looks to me like Huckleberry Center and TSO weren't due to be scheduled to be purchased until 2022 from this slide, which is about 100 laptops if we go back to the screen before that.
Nope, that is correct, Glenn. So what we wanted to do is look at this as an opportunity. So one thing we realized is as distance learning enhanced and changed, as we, to Mark's point, noticed flaws, we found issues that needed to be resolved. We needed staff to do more, that the devices couldn't necessarily hold up, to some of the requirements and demands. Excuse me. So we did want to take this opportunity, and the reason why this ask is this puts all of our teachers, support, certified BCBA, PT and OT, and everybody who's on that list. It puts everybody on an even level playing field in whatever situation and scenario we're on. It's a consistent same device across the board. But I do understand, I fully understand that in my ask, and in this request, I am asking for devices to be refreshed earlier than originally anticipated. I 100% understand that, and that was done, to try to get all of our staff even. Everybody has the same thing, consistent across the board, whether you're a kindergarten teacher or you're a 10th grade teacher or you're a senior, a 12th grade teacher.
And provide, we would be able to provide uniform professional learning and training with the new machines and the new power that they have to be ready for any of the scenarios that we have. And also the added benefit of keeping Chromebooks in students' hands and taking the older devices and repurposing them with the staff members who do not have machines to be able to go home and work in a distance situation, whether it's hybrid or actual fully at home.
I'll be honest with you. This sounds opportunistic as a way to pull forward future operating expenses into the COVID disaster. It really that's what it sounds.
Which Dan, I will say we are going to cover in a couple of slides, and I credit Marcia with this idea proposed. That could really help us. So sorry, Glenn, I think you want to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I'm in the same point with Dan, and I understand Marcia's going to have a thing. It's like, in a year without big asks, this is something that's an acceptable process. We had a huge ask from the start on the operating budget of 7%. We had to fight through it to get down to 3.5. Now we're going to have huge asks on extra costs. These are the areas we can't have huge asks in every area that we can control, possibly not huge asks. This is a nicety, not a necessity. And I appreciate it, and I get the logic behind it. But again, we are going to have a Chromebook for every student. We're going to have laptops that are going to be sitting on the shelf because you can't have, well, I will go through your thing. And I'm sitting here saying, at what point are we going to have to say no to one of your asks? At what point are we going to have to say, gee, we need an extra bus? And we're going to have to say, we don't have the money anymore. We just don't have the money anymore. We spent it on laptops that we really didn't need to replace until 2022. And this goes back to Dan's thing, is we don't have a big plan from you guys yet. We don't have a big picture from you guys yet. So we don't know if there's 100 big asks or if there's only 2 big asks. We don't know if we're looking at $1 million in expenditures to cover these opening schools or $10 million to cover these things. So these are the numbers that frustrate me of, this is a nicety. We're cutting 2 years off a laptop life to buy laptops, and the numbers are at least 100 between Huckleberry and Center. I think the number was at least 100 laptops. At what point do we bring back less opportunity, as Dan said, and bring back to reality of, here's our needs. This is our needs, not our wants. Our needs, necessities, absolute have to haves. And then you go to the next category of, this would be really nice. We see an opportunity, this would be really nice. Because at what point do we get pushed into the corner where we say, we don't have any more money, John. We don't have any more. There's no more. The extra bus that you absolutely need to get these students, we don't have it. And then we're going to be kicking ourselves that we didn't fine tooth some of these expenses that we could control. So, all right, we'll go on to the next, what Marcia did, but this story.
No, and I do understand that. You know, it is important. John mentioned it before. I did want to mention that as part of my presentation, and we'll go back here to the teacher count and the staff count. You know, this would give them all the devices that would be given back to us would be then given to all the support staff that would be able to utilize it at a moment's notice, and actually may even end up using in an in-person environment if they can't go classroom to classroom. You know, para-educators, secretaries, nurses, some unaffiliated group that works inside of schools. You know, they need devices as well, and either generally work on a desktop that's in their office or have no computer at all. In the past 3.5 months, we did have to give them Chromebooks that we had, so we did have to take from student devices to give to staff members. There are some laptops that we are you know, buying some time on. Not all devices that teachers give back to us can be turned around and given back to support staff. Some of them have broken hinges and broken plastics. Those honestly would be used as parts, so that we would not be going out and buying parts and supplies. And so we would put together a collection of the most fully functioning laptops that we could, that would become available for the rest of the support staff. You know, the idea is that we don't have a pile of devices sitting on a shelf. I've seen it not here. I've seen it in places in the past, and yeah, you don't want to buy technology and see it sit on a shelf, whether it's whether it's brand new or still usable. So I certainly understand. So anyway, so here's the staff count. Then Marcia, we can go on to the next part. I don't know if Marcia, you want to speak on this, handling the bump?
So one of the concerns that we had was that, okay, that if we buy this year, down the road, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, we don't spend anything, we don't spend anything, we don't spend anything, and then there we go with a bump of that we would have to spend something. So just like what we do with the fire trucks, or try to do with the fire trucks, is we talked about a reserve, that if we were to take the cost that would be out there of 150,000, assuming the same cost, and if the Board of Ed would put it in their budget every year, and then it would be transferred on July 1st over to the capital non-recurring fund and sit there as a reserve for school computers. So when they do have that bump year, the money is there.
Marcia, that sounds great. But what happens in 2024 when they need an extra teacher and, oh, in this reserve account, we've got $120,000. We've seen money get pulled from accounts for all sorts of purposes. And the Board of Education is on a shoestring budget every year, and they're looking for money every year.
July 1st is right there. It was put in there for a reason that doesn't hit the freeze. But yeah, there's nothing that we can do to predict the future. We do this sometimes with the fire trucks ourselves. That
we absolutely do it. We have a history of doing it. So I'm not buying into this right now. Sorry.
That's fine.
So this is just.
So
Go ahead.
sorry, John, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, my friend. Talk to it.
Okay. So some of the reason why we're talking now is, again, if we purchase them, this is back to Dan's question about the Chromebooks. Same rule applies here, lead time. When all of these devices, if all these devices were to arrive, there is time to unbox them, configure them, prepare them, barcode them, so we keep them in our asset inventory system, so we can keep track of every single one of them. This is prime time for us to do this kind of work. This is, as much as we're here for the staff and the students, the summer's the IT time to shine. This is when we get our projects done. This is when we prepare everything for the next school year. Trying to do all that while we're managing the school year will lead to a much longer length of time that we can get these devices ready, which would leave them sitting longer. And then you can see that the older devices that are physically broken or no longer function, there would be cost and time that would need to repair. We are working, because we haven't seen staff in 3.5 months, and it is up to them to report their issues. We are still evaluating damages versus non-damages. So unfortunately, I can't give you that number tonight, but if it's a desired number, I need the number. So if it's a number anybody's interested in, I can absolutely get it to you as soon as possible. But I do have my team working on breaks and damages and what we're looking at for that specific number as we work with our teaching staff. And that's why I mentioned that at the end of their current count of damaged machines depends on teachers reporting it. It often jumps when they all of a sudden need the device again, and somebody says, "Oh, I realize it something's wrong with it." So we may not hear so much, but we're trying to push for our staff to give us that information. And then I think, is that the last slide, Marcia?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So that's there it goes. So that's it so we'll take any questions for this now.
So pre-COVID, there was a replacement schedule for these laptops that was included in the original budget. That was, yeah.
Yeah, correct. You see it here. Yep.
There it is. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is a great general slide. I know you're not getting into too many particulars in a PowerPoint, but oftentimes, every year, we have some new hires. They can be scattered in any of these schools. So I don't remember how many new hires you had last year, but they got potentially new equipment, some of them, right?
Some, yes, a limited number. Like I said, the majority are replenished from staff members that leave, but
I hear that.
yeah, so go ahead, yes.
Also in the last year, been some breaks that you've had to replace them.
Yep.
And so we have a number of computers that are a year old.
Correct.
I don't know what that number is. Could be 10, could be, I don't know what. But
it's actually, I'll tell you, it's a dozen.
Okay. So I was
Yep.
close.
Yep.
But we're replacing them anyways in this proposal.
We would replace them for the teaching staff. They would not go anywhere. They would not go to any recycling. They wouldn't leave the district. They would be utilized.
But you're also buying 6 more of these to sit on a shelf, and now you'll have 12 that are a year old. So you're going to have 18 shelf stock items, or you'll disperse them to other administration staff or something, but who currently have computers that somewhat work too.
Correct.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's very important, and I appreciate Dan and Mark kind of saying that, I appreciate you coming. This looks like it might be opportunistic or something like that. Really, what it is trying to have the best opportunities for our staff in a very trying situation, and do the best we can for our students, and have the highest power equipment we can have with the opportunities before us. The bottom line is the Chromebooks are most important for our students, and we, as you can see in the schedule, there is a schedule there, and this would be a jump ahead on some of that schedule, but we all know that equipment gets older and breaks pretty quickly. So, I want to just be very transparent and honest with you folks, and we are here working together and trying to figure this out, and we appreciate the questions and the exercise, and we know you need to make decisions, and we understand we need to bring more information to you as it evolves with us and our planning, which we will do.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
I guess I don't even know what to say to that right now. My brain is a little lost on all of this. I think my biggest concern is when we get letters to approve things and dollar amounts thrown out there, like Dan said, on a Tuesday to approve dollars, and then we get down to a level of discussion here and now and dig deep, these numbers change and we find out so many different facts on numbers. It's so difficult to make a educated thought process on what are the true needs, what are the wants. John, it truly is opportunistic to put 276 laptops out there for the staff to all have new laptops beyond the same everything. I mean, companies have a hard time doing that with revenues and profit making, to put every employee on the same platform, and every employee gets a new laptop, and every 2 years we're going to put a laptop out there because we got different things. I mean, it's hard. That was a very opportunistic thing to put forward to us. I believe that wholeheartedly. The need isn't necessarily the 276. In your slide presentation, you actually have them coming in 2023. So that's a 3-year shortening of the term. And then your slide, it's a 3-year shortening of a capital item. That's a big ask. It's an opportunistic to get everybody on the same platform. Everybody wants the same right tools. I get all of that. But again, we're going to be in a process of approving millions of dollars, and we can't get a small thing right, in my opinion, like an ask right here. It needs to be a more realistic ask from what we get. Like I say, 400 Chromebooks, it's now down to 300. That's realistic. However, we're at 2,200 Chromebooks, and we may only have 2,200 students when we wash out of this thing with a need. We may even have extra Chromebooks. If 200 high schoolers decide that they're going to buy their own, we're down to 2,400 on the need. If 20% opt out or 40% opt out of going to school, we're going to be having Chromebooks, a possibility of having Chromebooks. And I guess each dollar right now is so critical. We went through the toughest budget season we've ever gone through on critical dollars for taxpayers. We have so many people out of work in this town, so many people out of work in this state, so many people out of work in this government. Dollars are going to become scarce. We don't even know if Connecticut can give us the education dollars anymore. I mean, I was talking to someone at the state and they're saying they're not sure because of the revenue losses that they're going to be able to give us the funding on the backside of all of these things. It's like every dollar counts. And this to me was opportunistic. And it's tough to approve that. It's tough for me as one member of the board to approve this big of an ask when I don't see the true need numbers behind it. It's a want. And it's like the Chromebooks too. And Ricky said it very eloquently. We are putting in permanent solutions to temporary problems. And the Chromebooks are going to enhance and be an investment. But that also puts us way ahead of other districts. I just saying we need to be more careful on these asks, in my opinion. And I could be wrong, but I really feel this ask was not presented to us in the right numbers. The numbers were all over the place, 400 to 300. The 276 was for all the staff members, a clean slate. It really wasn't a need or a requirement. It was the nicety. And we're going to be sitting here every meeting from now until, and even having special meetings, approving dollars that are needed for the school to open. And I think this ask missed the mark, in my opinion. It really did. So,
I do want to make something is I understand, and I saw Ricky's question, but I do say I don't see. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. I don't necessarily see technology as a permanent fix to a temporary solution. The more we do every single year, these programs and these curriculums and these resources that we use, we're using technology in and out of the school more and more. And there are districts out there, like I said, there's a small number of districts that are currently 1-to-1 for every student. But there are a lot of districts, and I didn't get a chance to allude to this before, there's a lot of districts that are exploring that option because of this, because of COVID and understanding that every device, because now you start talking about equity and equality. By giving a device to every student in the district, you put them on the same level playing field. So I know we're not the only district having these in this conversation, and I do understand that. And again, back to the 276, I understand definitely, where you're coming from. As an option, I don't know if I can throw this curveball out. Could we look at the opportunity of starting the device recycle a little early, starting with Wisconsin in the high school, starting with Wisconsin, and getting that process going early instead of all 276 at once. But I do really think that, we need the Chromebooks to give our students and to give them the best shot at whatever this learning environment is going to look like.
The Chromebooks are no-brainers, Eric. I'm on board. The Chromebooks, and I mean, I don't know how the rest of the board feels. You got $76,000 in cost. You got a $74,000 grant. You're talking $2,000, right? I mean, that's a given. That's, to me, how's that? I mean, I can't speak for everybody. Again,
and Glenn, to your point, the Chromebooks, frankly, everything's timely. But it really is more timely with the Chromebooks to make sure those would be in place for the students. And then that's the lead time piece.
Yeah, can I pop in here? Steve Dunn, even if we didn't have the 74,000, I think the Chromebooks, because we're gonna have to go to distance learning, that's my opinion, we have to be ready for it. So I think that's something we absolutely should do.
Steve, I agree with you. Steve, I actually agree with that statement totally. How's that as well? That was a no-brainer for me.
Glenn, I want to make a clarification though. It's not free. It's not a $74,000 grant. It covers, first of all, we might lose up to $2,000 of it to the Catholic school, Christian school, sorry. But that precludes us from using that $74,000 on anything else that was in the list that could have been covered, that we will now have to cover as a town.
Yes.
So they're not free. They're not close to free.
I agree.
And I agree with buy them, but it's not close to free.
I agree with
Yeah,
you.
okay, I agree. I agree. I mean, that to me, my only problem with the Chromebooks was the 400 to the 300 and how it was presented to us in that aspect of it, but I understand it more. So, Dan, your opinion?
I'm in complete agreement that the Chromebooks are a must and the laptop should stay on the existing schedule.
I will actually disagree with you a little bit. I don't disagree with you, Dan, and very often is I would like to go back to, let's see that big picture of where we're going to stand and evaluate all the costs. Again, I don't see all the value there, but I can see some value of, let's see what the big number is. If the number to open the school is 500,000, we can put it as a discussion item, right? I mean, I do think not throwing away, I don't know the right word, is shelving things before the planned shelf life has a cost, right? But I think until we see the big picture, I'd like to reevaluate. That's all, Dan. I don't really disagree, I guess.
That's a fair, I accept that. I accept that.
I think we need the big, and that's my fear of how many asks. I mean, Steve, what's your opinion?
My opinion on this is I think that the number of laptops is too high for right now, but I'm very concerned, and I'd like to know from Eric and John, we need every staff member to have the right equipment, whether it's 2 years old or 3 years old. Do we have enough equipment now to make sure that everybody has what they need? And do we have, I think, Eric, you had like 12 in reserve in case something broke or somebody needed to get one immediately. Are you comfortable if you got no more new laptops than you currently have in your existing budget, that you'll be okay?
No, so I currently have none in reserve right now. I have nothing in reserve. Those reserves have since been handed out, whether they're given to teachers and certified staff as break fixes, or if they were given to support staff because they needed to work from home for the last 3.5 months. So, you know, I scraped the barrel. I gave a personal laptop to a TSO coworker of mine because we needed something, you know, for example. So I'm scraping the barrel. So to handle some of these, you know, these break fixes, and we would limp along with repairs and device maintenance fees that I alluded to in the slide. But at some point in the next 12 months, I don't think I'm going to be able to buy zero. Maybe another dozen to supplement as we find out what's broken, maybe another 20. Do the majority of, the devices right now turn on and do what they need to do? Yes. Could they do better? Yes. But I don't think I'm going to be able to get away. Truth be told, I know it's July and right. School hasn't started yet, but truth be told is I'm going to need to supplement that somehow, whether it's repairs or just direct replacements because they're beyond repair.
So
do you have an estimate? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Glenn.
Go ahead. You're asking the same question I am, so go ahead.
Do you have an estimate as to how many? I know earlier you said that teachers show up in September and say, "Oh, guess what? This thing doesn't work anymore," and you're scrambling around. Do you have an idea how many you need? That you probably have a good feel for this. How many are going to come in and say they're dead, we can't use them anymore, and then how many do we want to keep in reserve just in case to keep everybody up and running?
Truth be told, I don't like keeping a lot in reserve. I don't like keeping more than, I definitely don't like keeping double digits in reserve because that is taxpayer money that was purchased to buy devices, and I don't want to see them sit on shelves. Where I looked at my 6 was one for each building, plus one to have on hand. That's where my 6 came from. Excuse me, to supplement the districts. I know about 10 right now of computers that would need to be fixed, repaired, or replaced. I know of 10. I anticipate that number probably hanging around 15 to 20, to be completely honest with you. But like I said, I can tell you right now, I know about 10 of them.
Let's
Okay.
go back, John, before you jump in, let's go, and I'm gonna be proactive a little bit, so let's go back to the slides of the schedule. Let's go back to Dan's thoughts, quick. Let's go back to the replacement schedule.
Marcia, you can pull that up.
Back to Dan's logic a little bit. When I think about Dan's logic, sometimes it comes back around. So if we were to replace one of the schools or the high school and the middle school 1 year early, say, what are those numbers? If we were to take one school right now and replace one school as a starting block.
I'm just doing the math for you, Glenn. Hold on.
So the high school, what's the high school? Are there
The Wisconsin and the high school combined would be.
Thirds of the number.
There it is, right there, Eric.
Yeah.
Did you guys pull up the slide?
So 93 and
184.
91. So go back to the other slide, the replacement. So it's 90 for that. The middle school was, 90. So if we decided to take this like almost like Dan said, one school at a time,
Yep.
how would that help the process?
Immensely. Immensely, Glenn, which is I did mention, I think I mentioned that before, is that when I said something about a curveball, I said, could I propose the idea of just starting the schedule, now with one or two schools, whatever. So, just starting with our oldest devices, let's use Wisconsin here, our middle school, summer 2015.
So that's 91 notebooks or 91 laptops.
Getting that process started a year early would be an immense step in the right direction. Absolutely.
Because that would give you a big reserve, right, of laptops that
because we take
that would then take the devices that are handed. So let's say we give 91 devices out to Wisconsin, right? I'm going to get those devices back from the teachers, fix and repair, account for a couple that may not be able to be saved. And you're talking 80 to 85 devices, rough numbers. Those would then be supplemented throughout the district.
Marcia, then you come in here, Marcia, for a second. What then if we found out we could get more of that state grant? Could we then, once we find out if we get approved for 300,000 more on that state grant, can we up it to 2 schools at that point?
We could. That state grant would definitely pay for these. There is paperwork that says that this is what it would cover.
So if we agreed, right, and I'm not saying we are, I'm putting it out there on my board. If we agreed to the 91 to start the program at the Wisconsin, which sort of coordinates what Dan's saying, then we find out through Marcia and Steve's filing for those grants that we have an extra couple $100,000 possibly that we could use for technology. We could pick up another school on the backside, maybe.
Yes, we could.
Dan?
I can live with that.
Mark?
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah,
I didn't really get a turn here.
you can get a turn.
How many replacement laptop? Well, since on laptops, I had one on the Chromebooks. How many replacement laptops did we have in this year's budget? Was this the only year we didn't have any scheduled replacements?
Correct. No scheduled replacements. The only replacements were small quantity numbers that we use. I have a technology supply budget for.
Well, I don't see that on this thing anywhere. You're asking for a full amount and you had some amount you were going to replace. But I would suggest that we have a poor replacement schedule if we don't have some being a chunk of them being replaced every year. So I'm hoping you'll look into that in the future.
Okay.
My other statement, I guess, is everybody here is all talking about technology and we need more technology, but we also keep talking about we need to keep kids off of screen time. We don't do any technical classes. There's a blue collar town. People can make a great living as electricians and plumbers, and nobody's worried about any of that. Everybody's just worried about give the kids a computer. I don't get the logic behind that. I'm sorry.
Mark? As part of our strategic plan, we are embarking on or actually revisiting, revitalizing, whatever you want to talk about, call it, come the fall. And we're looking at career and tech and our career pathways at the high school. And so exactly what you're talking about is part of the vision of where we're going. So just so you know that.
That is great to hear.
But in our computerized digital world and preparing students, as you know, I don't need to go into a dissertation on this. And in the scenarios we have, technology is a must. And so you must be prepared.
I'm not saying it's not, but it is not for every kid. And I'm glad to hear you have a thought.
And you know,
computers.
so, I'm sorry, Mark. And you know as well as anybody, in the trades, you're using technology all the time. So it's all part of it.
I mean, that's a great sentiment and a great thing, but it's not a Board of Finance topic, Mark.
You're right. Sorry.
Yana, how do you feel about 91 in the 300?
Sorry, I just had to have some food. I can live with that. I think also my question would be, Eric, if some of the ones that we replaced still had life left, could they be used as spares for broken computers versus getting the new ones? So if we just started at, as Glenn said, and Dan agreed, and Mark about the replacing them at Wisconsin, we start there. You weed out the ones that are salvageable, so to speak. They can be used as spares when other teachers break down. That might get us a little bit more longevity towards the high school, Huckleberry Center. And then I think now that it's an on the table discussion, we kind of, as a group, get it. And we just need to look forward knowing that.
Spares, support staff for any potential distance learning. I mean, I can go on and on. The point is that, yeah, every device would find a home that is salvageable. That's a good way to put it, Brianna, salvageable. So yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So basically, to sum it up, right now, what we're talking about is 91 laptops to replace the middle school Wisconsin. It trains out a whole school. Eric will repurpose those laptops to backfill the other schools as required and as spares. Then 300 Chromebooks go into the system as well right now, which you guys would decimate as needed. We would revisit this after we get the big picture of the school's opening costs and see where we stand. And then we would revisit it again when Marcia and Steve get a number on what dollars we're getting reimbursed for COVID related expenses. And if we have more money, we can bring this back to another discussion. Are we all in agreement with that? Steve Dunn, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to do it.
Marcia, are you in agreement? No, Marcia?
Yes, I am. I was just muted.
All right, John Lucas, you've heard all of this. You're part of our team. How do you feel about it?
No, I absolutely agree. You guys have to come to an agreement that lays out the plan, and I think you're there. So I think you're on the right path. That's perfect.
All right, Dan D, you're good.
I think it's a good compromise, sir.
Mark, you good?
I'm good.
Brianna, you good?
Good.
All right, Marcia, add up the numbers, please. Right, somebody have them in front of them, 91 times whatever.
Bet you Eric has it.
Dude, just give me a second to pull up that spreadsheet.
Is it the spreadsheet from the one that you got, the winning bid?
Yeah.
Okay, I have that up. So.
All right.
Yep. So yeah. Go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brianna.
No, that's okay. It would be 91 times 538.67, right?
Correct.
Okay, so 49,018.97.
Yep.
And 300 times.
We'd have to add in the 76,860. We
Yep.
got to make the appropriation for the total amount. So do you have that number, Brianna?
Let's see. You're talking about the Chromebooks now, right?
Yeah, because we got to appropriate the whole amount, right?
So is that the 76,860
Yep.
Yep.
plus?
It's $125,878.97.
All right.
Bam.
And out of that 125,000, whatever number, we are going to utilize 74,000 of that CARES grant to backfill that, correct? We have to prove the whole amount. So the net cost to the town right now is like 70,000 or whatever, correct?
I think we have to approve it all because they don't have the grant yet.
Right.
We have to approve it all, but I'm saying after the grant is approved, that comes back to the town. The net cost is 125 minus 75.
Yes.
Right?
But we don't know the amount of the grant that we're going to have to give to the Christian Life Academy either.
Okay, it's within 70,000, whatever. The dollar, what I'm saying is we're approving 125 with the anticipation of getting a return of at least 70,000 on the backside.
Right. Probably
Right.
closer to 74,000 or
All right.
72,000. Yeah.
So can you make that motion, Mark, to for that number? Did you have it?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we approve the purchase of up to 91 laptops and 300 Chromebooks for an amount not to exceed $125,878.97 with the intent of around $72,000 to come back to the town after the school administration receives a grant. I'm not sure that I did that right.
Let's just prove the whole amount. Forget the grant. Let's
Okay.
amend that to just the amount.
So up to an amount not to exceed $125,878.97.
I'll second it. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I'm sorry, can I amend that to payable upon receipt of invoice?
How do we handle this?
That's how we said we were going to approve things moving forward on all sides of money.
Right, but how do we amend the,
I just amend the motion,
all right, amend the motion, go ahead.
add upon receipt of invoice, and you have to amend it, or somebody has to resecond that if they want.
I'll resecond. No discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Eileen is not on right now. Eric, will that help you now?
Yes, thank you. And I want to take again this opportunity to say thank you to the Board of Finance for not only this approval that will greatly benefit our students and begin our staff as well, but also thank you for the time to speak and present tonight. And I do appreciate your questions and hope I was able to answer everything and help out there. So thank you.
And stay close to Marcia and Steve, like I say, about the grant money and everything we really need the big, I mean, not your aspect, but Dr. Burrell aspect, we need the big picture, but let's make sure Marcia and Steve know and these grant monies as they come in, right? We might be able to utilize more of the grant money.
And for me, thank you, Eric, but also Board of Finance, thank you. I know it was a 2.5-hour meeting here tonight, and I thank you for your time because this is the process. We have to go through this. We have to exercise these things, talk, ask the questions, settle, and make plans going forward. And you've been there for us. I'm just entering my 6th year here, and while it's not always easy, you're there for us, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like Dan said, John, if we could get a number to us ahead of time, we all want to support the school opening. We all promise to support the school opening. I think a lot of us have a fear that this number, like cleaning the schools, is going to be a big number.
No, I know, Glenn. And you know what? There's a heavy heart that we all come to these meetings with because we're trying to figure out these numbers. There's a lot of unknowns. It's anxiety producing for all of us, and we're trying to figure this out together. And the lead time on the Chromebooks, was obviously a factor. So that made this feel very urgent. And so that added to the stress of the evening. I understand.
Right. We expressed that same anxiety on our side.
Yeah.
you have on your side. So I need you to
I'm saying
understand
for
that.
you, I understand. I get it. That's my point. I appreciate where you're coming from. I really understand.
All right, well, thank you so much. And we're moving on to the next part of this, the town center streetscape. Thanks, everybody from the Board of Ed side. Thank you all. And from
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
So let's bring Greg up. Greg's going to make a presentation that he gave to the Board of Selectmen on Monday on this. Then we can have a discussion. Is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Steve. So I think Dan Secor has my presentation. So Steve, I'll let you start with this first page since it's your signature here.
Yeah. So on the streetscape, I'll give a high-level overview and then Greg will go through the numbers. We have an opportunity now. The supermarket is moving forward. They've been through inland wetlands and they're going to be right next to the Still River Greenway, right by Laurel Hill. So we have an opportunity now to do two things: put the streetscape in front of that supermarket, which would be a good thing. And the second is to save some money by combining it with phase 3. The issue that we have here is that we cannot have, we're asking for $90,000 on phase 5 from the town. We cannot have a town meeting to approve this. So the executive orders allow us, and our town attorney has reviewed this and approved this, we can, through the action of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, approve capital spending projects without a town meeting or referendum, meeting 3 or 4 criteria. In this case, I'm sorry? I'm sorry. In this case, we are looking for to pay 80% of this project with LOTSIP money. WestCog, which is the governing group that I belong to, that Brookfield belongs to, along with 14 other towns, is in control of the LOTSIP money. They've changed the process by which you get approved to get that LOTSIP money. And what they've changed it to is basically a first come, first served process. So in this round of LOTSIP money, there is $15 million available. There is $31 million worth of projects chasing after that 15 million. So whomever gets their approvals first, gets them in there and gets them done, will get the LOTSIP money. That's what they're going to do. The reason they're doing that is because in previous LOTSIP years, they would have, say, $15 million. They would approve $15 million worth of projects in 2014. 7 million of those projects haven't even been started yet. And so the state came to us and said, listen, if you don't spend this money, we're not going to give you any more money. So they changed the process so to the first come, first serve. Brookfield has always, on these projects, once we've applied for the money, we've started spending it within 2 years. Other towns don't do the same thing. They propose a project, but then they don't do the design. They don't get the town match done. They don't do those sorts of things. So we have a unique opportunity here, and we do meet the requirements. I believe the Board of Selectmen believes, and also our town attorney agrees that we can do this approval without having to go to town meeting for 90,000. Now, all of us would prefer to go to town meeting and have the townsfolk approve it. So now I'll let Greg go through a presentation of the phase 5 project and how we're going to combine it with the 3 and how we're going to save what we believe is 82,000 of the 90,000. Greg, you want to go ahead?
Okay, so with that introduction, yep. So I have 2 agenda items tonight. Right now, we're talking streetscape phase 5. So Steve talked about, and I'll give an overview map to level set all of us on the next page. Steve talked about this LOTSIP solicitation that's out there now. 9 towns submitted 13 applications. We submitted 2 applications for streetscape phases 4 and 5. They both got approved by the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and an 824 referral from the Planning Commission, and those applications went in and they were accepted. And I'll show you that attached letter of support later in the presentation. But with approval tonight, which is basically in lieu of a town meeting, we have an opportunity to fast track phase 5 and put it in with phase 3 next summer. And that's an opportunity that I'm presenting to you. Even without that opportunity, we still need your approval in lieu of a town meeting to start the phase 5 engineering. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So just to level set, if we can get that whole map on one page by shrinking or whatever. So, you know, phase 1 was done 3 summers ago at the Four Corners intersection. I think you all know it goes in 4 directions. Phase 2 was done last summer. Its goal was to connect phase 1 to the Still River Greenway. We achieved that goal. And that section is used for sidewalk and parking. Phase 3 came about a couple of years ago when we noticed that a lot of residents on Laurel Hill were cutting across Federal Road at various places to get to the Still River Greenway Trail. In fact, if you talk to Angelo DeCuna at Brookfield Cleaners, he will tell you residents cutting through his parking lot concern him. Mothers and strollers, there's no sidewalk, they have no place to walk safely, so they cut through his parking lot. So that was the incentive for us coming up with Streetscape Phase 3. We got that LOTSIP grant approved. Construction is going to be next summer. Phase 4 has always been on the books to get us all the way to Newberry Village. And the gap on phase 4 is what Tony Lucera is going to be doing for the Enclave and for Green Acres across the street. So phase 4 would just be connecting Tony's project and what we would do to get us to Newberry Village. Phase 5 was the newest idea. This idea came about really in either December or January when Tony Lucera came to a development services meeting and said he's moving along rapidly to put a grocery store development on the east side of Federal Road. And with that, he would really appreciate another crosswalk and some sidewalks for residents to cross there. It's at that point that we pursued, when the application opportunity came up, to submit an application for phase 5. I'll just make a quick note on phase 4. It's already been approved by a town meeting with a TAP grant, but a TAP grant, which is federal money, requires a lot larger percentage of a town match. With phase 4 approval with a LOTSIP, we need a lot less town money. So that's a good thing for us as we pursue phase 4. The reason why we want to push phase 5 first is the developmental opportunities along that stretch where the sidewalks go, which now include a medical building on the southwest corner of Federal Road in Laurel Hill, and 6 townhomes along Old Route 7, another project by the Scalzos. So there's a lot going on all across here, and that just kind of gives you a big picture on our 5 phases. I'll briefly mention future. You may or may not know there's a developmental opportunity on Laurel Hill, 101, 103, and 105 Laurel Hill for another apartment complex. And if that comes to be, we may consider a phase 6 down the road that gets us all the way from Brookfield Village up Laurel Hill. The one last comment I'll make, there's another task force going on. It's headed by Jay Annis. And that task force is to consider ways and routes and costs to get our trail north into New Milford. And as all of this develops and we work with developers and with Jay's team, we are evaluating all the routes to get that Still River Greenway up north as far as possible. So that is also going on in parallel behind all of these phases, and it's all kind of, we're trying to pull it all together. So that's a very high level overview. Any questions before I move on? Okay, next slide, please. So this is just an example of attachment E to the LOTSIP application that Steve signed back on May, it looks like 12th of 2020. And this was the Board of Selectmen's approval and Board of Finance's eventual approval for what was then the cost for phase 5. which was $600,000 with a 15% or $90,000 town commitment. So that's all history, just a little background for you. Next page, please. So the first box shows how we came up with the $600,000. You can see how much of it's coming from LOTSIP, how much is coming from the town. If we act quickly, because we have not finalized the design for phase 3, nor have we finalized the bid package, which we plan to do by December to go out to bid in January, and we combine phase 5 with phase 3, it is my opinion that we can save about $82,000. And that's how I come up with those numbers in those columns. And that would get phase 5 down to $517,000. Where do those cost reductions come from? We would eliminate one project by mobilizing and demobilizing both phases together. We would eliminate one public bidding cycle, which takes, a couple of months. It's primarily my time and our engineers' time. We would eliminate several months of DOT design and review because we would do it all at once. And we would get the project done 1 year sooner, basically next summer instead of the following summer. So that is all I have to present to you on this particular item. Any questions?
I don't know that I really have a question so much as a statement. I think this was you did a great job, and this was a good deal to the town at you and Steve at $90,000. I think it was a great deal. If we can get this for $7,500 is beyond fathomable. So that's great. Thank you for all your work on that too. And I think what they did already looks great. I have a quick question, probably more for Steve. What about rename? It's not a Board of Finance thing. I'll bring it up after. I think we should recall this area Main Street, but I'll talk to you about that later.
I got a fight about calling it Town Center District, Main Street. Oh God, that's DOT. Okay.
All right. But anyways, I think it's a great project, especially at that cost or lack of cost.
It makes a lot of sense.
Even though I don't want to spend a lot of money right now with coronavirus stuff here, it's almost free.
It's almost free. And that's one of the reasons we're pushing phase 4 off. We just don't
and you get parking, and safety for the people that use the greenway.
True. Yeah, because the supermarket project is going to give us 40 parking spaces dedicated to municipal. So that's a win for us.
That's all I have.
Dan, you got anything? Brianna?
I do not. In for a penny, in for a pound. This seems like a good deal.
Yeah, me too. I'm good.
So then basically we need to make an emotion back to your letter then, Steve, right on this?
Yeah, so to approve $600,312 with $90,000 from the town. And then if we get the savings, we've got it.
So I will make a.
Yeah, up to 90,000 from the town.
Up to 90,000, right. Better.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the special appropriation for the streetscape project phase 5 in the amount not to exceed $600,312, comprised of $510,312 in LoSiP grant money and $90,000 in town funding, having found that the approval of the special appropriation meets the executive order issued by the governor, and that the approval of this project without town meeting is necessary to permit the orderly operation of the town, and there is a need to permit the town, to orderly operation of the town. That's my motion.
May I make one suggested change to Mark's point, up to 90,000, not 90,000.
Okay.
You don't have to re-say the whole thing, Glenn. Just say amend it
Up to 90,000. I'd like to amend it to up to 90,000 of town funding, correct?
Yes.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second that.
All right. All those in favor?
I have a quick
Aye.
discussion.
Oh.
One quick
Oh,
discussion. I'm
discussion, sorry.
sorry. I meant to ask it before, just where is the up to 90,000 coming from?
Oh, contingency.
It is. So we have contingency that's specific for COVID.
No, we don't.
Expenses, and then we have another contingency, correct?
No, yeah. We have to find a place to get the 90,000. That's a really good question. We could change that in the future. Marcia, do you have a suggestion as to where we would get the 90,000? We can bond it, right? We can borrow it. I don't think we need to do that because we're going to end up, I think it's, about $7,000 to $8,000 in expense. So we could say at this point in borrowing, I prefer borrowing if we needed to do that, because then in the next year we can find $7,000 to $8,000.
Right, and we wouldn't be paying it off this year anyways. We're going to ban it until we get the loan, till we get the grants.
Right.
So then we just borrow or pay off the little bit. But I agree with Dan. We should spell out that, and I would suggest we spell out, because it's up to 90 grand, spell out that we're going to bond it out of future bonding.
So I would say up to 90,000 in borrowing. And then when we get to that point, like we have with previous bans, we just let them roll off and don't borrow.
All right. With too bad he's not here, but the Ricky rule, you need to have the ins and outs for any request.
Yep.
You're right. All right.
Marcia, you want to help us with that?
The Ricky rule. I do like the Ricky rule. Good call, Dan. Thank you.
Marcia.
All right, I was eating my dinner. I would say that it would go through the bonded capital project funds, with the ins being 500. Let me go back to the screen.
510,312 probably.
Yes. That would be the anticipated revenue from the grant, 90,000 something for the anticipated revenue from bonding, and the out being the construction cost of 600,312, I think it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we get that as a follow-up to Dan? I mean, we understand the timeliness of the.
Amend your motion to include Marcia's comments.
Yeah.
Right, but what I'm saying is, can we get that for a record for our next meeting? We understand the timeliness that he has to get the approval so they can first come, first serve.
Yes.
But to follow Dan's Ricky rule, and he's right, we should have a document at our next meeting that we can follow it in the process and record it as a record.
Okay, we'll put that together for you.
Perfect.
Okay. So Mark, go ahead and amend it to what you want to amend it to, because.
It's your motion, so you just amend it to add Marcia's comments.
All right, so I'd like to amend my motion to add Marcia's comments.
Still second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, it passes. There.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
So then let's talk about the Candlewood Lake Road water line.
Let's talk about it.
So you want me to give a quick overview? So, we have the school going in, where I think everyone is agreed, both the Board of Ed, the MBC, the Board of Selectmen, and I'm hoping you guys, that we have a choice here. We can either put a couple new wells, pumps, storage tank, and the supporting facilities for the new school, including, putting the sprinklers in and pumps and things like that. Or we can run a water line up Candlewood Lake Road. Aquarian would, once we build the line, like we did with all the other water lines in town, Aquarian then will take it over, manage it, and maintain it. We don't have to do a thing to the line. So we also looked at, as many of you are aware, we are having a problem with some people residents on Candlewood Lake Road who have high chlorides and salt content in their wells. It is those people's contention that the town has caused that damage to their wells through our salting process in the winters during storms. I have to say the town has not agreed that the town is responsible for that. DEEP has become involved. they've strongly suggested that we make amends or make repairs or make these residents whole in terms of water. So there's no doubt in my mind at some point in time the DEP is going to get much firmer about this process. And so we have 30 residents, 30 homesteads on Candlewood Lake Road. 6 or 7 of them right now do have affected wells. So we would in effect be, one, bringing a stable source of water to the Huckleberry Hill New School. We would get out of the business of being a public water supply system, which involves a lot of paperwork, a lot of testing, quite a bit of liability for maintaining good water to the school. And at the second time, we would also be able to give all the residents on this section of Candlewood Lake Road access to the water line. So we think that, and again, our town attorney agrees with us, as well as the Board of Selectmen, that for health and safety concerns, and also for the fact we could have financial expenditures over and above what we would normally spend if we don't move this process forward, because we need that water line up and ready for the school when they start construction, that it does meet the requirements of the governor's executive order. And we would ask that the Board of Finance, as the Board of Selectmen has done, approve this. And I would like everyone to understand that the full cost of this line will be repaid to the town by all of the property owners. Now, those property owners include the schools, include the town. So we're going to be paying a large portion of this. We haven't figured out the total allocations as to who's going to pay what, but we will do that. There are rules. We have rules. I think it's Ordinance 215. You know, size of the lot, value, building units, to determine what those assessments are, and we can do that fairly and reasonably effectively. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is that we have been approved for a 2% loan from the DWRSF to build this line because of the problems some of the residents are encountering. And they will pay, they will give us a loan for 100% of the construction costs and the contingency associated with construction. Immediately upon completion of the construction, they will forgive 25% of that. So that will help us in lowering the overall cost of this project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg, and then we can answer any questions you have. Greg?
Okay, thanks, Steve.
I have some questions now already.
Sure.
And I don't want to forget them.
Yeah.
I mean, $1.8 million, $61,000 per house. You're going to assess these people that 30 houses?
No, it doesn't go anywhere near that.
Which means the town is bearing a major brunt of it. So it's not really mostly paid by the houses. It's
no, I didn't say that. I said the town's going to be paying a major portion of this.
Right. Does Elbow Hill or what's North Mountain Road? Do they have the same problem? Does everywhere we can't possibly salt Huckleberry or Candlewood Lake Road, where those houses are, more than we salt the hills in town. How is? And do we have a letter from
Mark, we're not saying we caused this problem. The residents are, and the DEP is leaning that way and putting significant pressure on us about this. We are now providing water. We're now providing water to 2 of the residents based on pressure from the DEP. Even if there was no salt damage, we still want to put this water line into the school. We do.
Well, I have,
in my opinion,
I'd like to see the report on the well at the school and what it's going to cost for new wells at the school, because you mentioned that if we put wells in, we're going to have holding tanks and pumps. My contention would be you're still going to need holding tanks and pumps because Aquarion's only going to deliver us 35 PSI max, and your fire protection system in school is going to need 100 to 125 PSI. So you're going to need pumps and holding tanks no matter what.
We're going to need a pump and a storage tank. That's true.
No matter what.
No matter what. We're not going to need the wells.
Right. If we put this in, we're not going to need the wells. So I'd like to see a cost assessment. before I can look at $1.8 million, I'd love to see a cost of assessment of wells for the school. But I'm not even sure that the school, if you want to make this as a standalone project, I can talk about it, but to link this to the school, I think is premature at this time.
No, the schools don't have to hook up, but then we would assess just the other. If we run this only to the edge of the school property.
Yep.
Right? Then it would be a ridiculous amount of money to pay, each resident would pay. It would just be not manageable.
I agree with that. I'm just not certain, going through the issues that are popping up on Huckleberry School at that site, I'm not certain that that's a viable, that the school's going to go there yet. I don't know that we're far enough along to be borrowing money against the school for a project when we don't have approval for the school.
From our, and you're on inland wetlands, you know this. There are 3 issues that they had, and from what our experts are telling us, none of these are unmanageable. We have the most important one is the sedge grass, right? Which you simply have to protect in place.
Well,
do
going
you honestly believe the inland wetlands is going to turn down based on the objections that have been made so far? We're actually restoring the waterway on the school.
Looking at the report from Christopher Mangles, which is the Malone and McBroom, their expert, that was written on November 12th. We didn't receive it until June 6th. Their expert has a lot of problems with it, a lot of issues. The hairy fruited sedge is clearly one of them. Considerable potential for other species of interest in certain focal groups, especially in interior wetland sections, was noted. It's a butterfly habitat for a very rare butterfly. I'd have to look in here to find which one that is. That's only found in 2 other places in the entire state. He asked for their expert asked for additional survey work. Although diligently executed, this survey constituted a seasonally limited first-time effort. Thus, its findings should not be interpreted as conclusive, but rather serve as groundwork for further inventory work. This should include all vascular plant groups, And matter of fact, he wants them to stop mowing there in the field, in areas of the field. He wants a year-long survey. But probably the bigger problem is the eastern box turtle.
But come on, Steve Trinkhouse, we both know, wants 100% of what Steve Trinkhouse wants.
No. This is their expert. This is not Steve Trinkus.
Yeah.
Here's Steve Trinkas's report. I'm not going to go into that one. I'm just going off of their expert right now that's been presented to wetlands. There's eastern box turtle habitat there.
Yeah.
That's a problem. There is nothing wetlands can do to steer around that. So there might need to be just some tweaks, might be some major tweaks. I'm just not sure we're far enough along for me to feel comfortable approving money to come out of the pocket of the school. I just don't know yet. It's not there to me. I'm just one person.
I see your point entirely, but the plan for the Huckleberry Hill property includes, and we all know this property has been completely filled in. We filled in a waterway. We did. We filled it all in. We're restoring that waterway. We're going to have that waterway go in front of the school. You've seen those plans, right?
I have.
If anything, we're improving.
Well, that's not a sustainable, as detailed in there, it's not a sustainable, will not include as restorative wetland because it's not built like a wetland. But I agree, it'd be nice, it could be a nice learning center. But there are issues, there are major issues there. And I certainly would not want to open us up to a lawsuit for all of the 830G homes or whatnot that we've denied because they were going to impact wetlands. All of that is in consideration right now.
You guys all have to do your job.
We do.
Then we have like a 2 to 3 month window here, right? In which to get this done so that it's ready for the schools when they need it. And there is a time frame. We don't have to do it today, but we have a 2 or 3 month window, and Greg can talk about it a little bit more. But the net here is, if we don't put in a water line, DEP is most likely going to come down with an order to us, much like they did for the condominiums. Then we will be paying 100% of that water line. Not assessing anyone, in my opinion. We're just going to have to put in the water line, or deliver bottled water to every single house on Candlewood Lake Road that is affected. And that will go even further.
And I'm
It's the
assuming our
biggest mistake.
Attorney Beecher is in contact with the DEP or something, because that is a ridiculous demand from the DEP.
The DEP has not issued an order yet, but
Right.
they've made it pretty clear in our conversations that they believe that the proximate cause of the salt and chlorides in these people's wells is our plowing and salting. You know, we can have this argument for 3 hours.
Right.
You guys can say no.
I don't think
Why
we're
don't we do
arguing.
this,
I don't
Mark?
think you and I are arguing about that.
Yeah, why don't we go through this,
All right.
see what it is, you guys can understand it and make a decision from there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think we're getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, not a little bit of a tangent, but I think we should see the whole plan and what we're doing first, so everybody sees it.
Fair
Does
enough.
that make sense?
Fair enough. Go ahead, Greg.
So
Okay,
before,
thanks, Greg.
before I go to the first slide, let me just add 2 comments to your conversation. The first is that the evaluation of this project took about 10 months with Dr. Sullivan, with sampling wells up and down Candlewood Lake Road, and a lot of analysis, including the help of Dan Caldwell at the schools. And maybe one thing to help all of you feel more comfortable with how we got to this point is to read the engineering report. And if anybody would like to see it, I'd be happy to send it to you first thing tomorrow morning, because it talks about all the contaminated properties along this way that we're providing this main.
Greg, you're already going to know. I want to see it.
Okay, so Mark,
that
I'll
out,
send it
Greg.
to you. I'll send it to you, and you can obviously forward on to the rest of the board.
Just send it to the BOF.
I'll send it to the BOF. Thank you. The second thing I want to mention is the school project is also running a gas line up the same route to the new school. And one of the real important, I think, benefits is doing this both together so that we're not shutting down Candlewood Lake Road 2 different times next summer. So we're trying to work, well, we are working with the school project to coordinate this with the gas line coming up Candlewood Lake Road. So there are a lot of nuances regarding schedule and timing to minimize the impact to traffic next summer on Candlewood Lake Road. So those are just a couple general comments. Now I'll go through the presentation. Next slide, please. So right here, so right there you go. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the approval letter that we received on April 8th. It's in your package. It's just for reference and background sake. And you will see in that letter, it does reference the PER that was approved, and that's the basis for the Department of Public Health's approval for this project. I then want to share with you a map to talk about the 30 properties that are going to be assessed and how we're going to go through that process. I then want to share with you the cost estimate, which is also attached. And then next steps, which I'll just mention here briefly. We've already 9 companies interviewed for the engineering design for this project. We have already identified the lowest qualified bidder. And I'm happy to report that bid came in about half of what's in my cost estimate. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. The next thing we have to do after your approval, or after we get approval, is we have to meet with the 30 property owners to inform them of what their assessment is going to be. And it is chapter 215 in the town ordinance that describes how you calculate a capital assessment for a water line. There's 4 elements. It's frontage, acreage, number of equivalent building units, and assessed value. And you just make a calculation basically, even for undeveloped properties, and there is one along this route. And the last thing again is we're trying our best to coordinate the construction of that main along with the gas line. Because you have to have certain degrees of separation, there's already a sewer line running down the southbound shoulder. The water line is going to run along the northbound shoulder, and the gas line is going to be in between. We've got to meet certain separation requirements. Let me quickly talk about the schedule. We would like to have the design done by October. The Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Department told us it's going to take at least 1 month for them to review and approve it. They have to approve it because they're the one that's going to be giving us the low interest rate loan and the 25% loan forgiveness. We then want to go out to bid in January. We want to start construction in May, And we think it's going to be 3 months of construction, including commissioning of the line and allowing laterals to tie in for those property owners that choose to tie in. Now, why are we picking this timeline? We want to have the main in service before the blacktop plants close in the fall of 21, because the school is going to need that water in the spring of 22, and we don't want to take the chance of not having that main in service before the winter of 21. So that's our schedule. And to Steve's point, we do have a couple months of play here, but really not much more than that. Any questions before I move on?
Again, I just want to, their expert, and our experts certainly aren't going to back down, wants a 1-year survey of the property before we even break ground on the Huckleberry School property. So I think you're premature in saying when they're going to need water for it.
Want is a different thing from absolutely. The inland wetlands decides whether you are going to agree with that or not. And you're sitting on 2 different boards and making decisions on both boards, and they have a conflict here. Doing what's financially most effective for the town is different than what's sometimes, unfortunately it is, what you do on the Inland Wetlands Commission, right? They can conflict with each other.
We will ask again. I have asked previously. We will, and you know that, and I will ask the Ethics Commission again. Matter of fact, file a complaint.
I have no, I'm not trying to cast any aspersions, Mark, here. I'm just saying that there is a conflict here, that you're trying to do the right thing on 2 different commissions and they might conflict.
So get a ruling.
Okay, yeah, we will. Let's move on.
So let me just say regarding a schedule, I'm just assuming for the sake of this project, we want to have the main in service before the winter of 21. If that assumption changes for whatever reason, of course, this schedule can change. That's all I'm saying with the schedule. Next slide. So this is the 2-page letter. It's in your package. That is the approval letter dated April 8th. This is after about 10 months of work. You have no idea what it took to get this far. It was painful. And you can read this through for yourself. Yes, there is low main pressure, but Aquarian said there's ways we have to communicate this to the property owners. They have to agree to basically put a booster pump in. So we've had many, many meetings with Aquarian Water on this project. So I'll let you read this for yourself, but the most important thing regarding this approval is it's approved based on the engineering study that was done and approved by the Department of Public Health. I will send that report to you tomorrow. Okay, this is one of the figures in the PER report. Let me just talk about this briefly. Is we looked at 3 ways to get water to these contaminated properties. We looked at coming from Federal Road across Rocky Road or Huckleberry Hill Road. We looked coming south from New Milford, and then we looked coming north from Candlewood Lake Road. That study took several months, and we came to the logical, and I think the right conclusion, that the lowest cost way to benefit the most number of properties was to pick up the main on Nabby Road at the driveway where it ends. And that point is the point at which the water main was put in for the Brookfield Commons apartments right there on Nabby Road. So at the very southern tip of this map, that's the driveway into those apartments. So we'll pick up the 12-inch main there. We'll go east on Nabby Road. We'll turn north into the northbound shoulder and go up to the school. The main will stop at 99 Candlewood Lake Road. That just happens to be the middle point of the school property. Why 99 Candlewood Lake Road? That is the northernmost property with a contaminated well. All the wells that we sampled north of that, including, I think it's 101 or 103 or 105 Candlewood Lake Road, did not, their sodium and chloride levels did not exceed the state limit. So maybe you want to call it coincidence, call it whatever you'd like, but the main is going to end at 99 Candlewood Lake Road because that meets the requirements for this grant, and that happens to be right at the middle of the property line of the Huckleberry School project, the Huckleberry Elementary School. And that's the point at which the new school would have to pick it up. Now, on that pink line, there are 30 properties on both sides of the road that would be assessed. And we have modeled the assessment tables for what each property would be assessed based on chapter 215 in the town ordinance. And that will be presented to those 30 property owners in very short order after this project's approved. Any questions on this page?
Yeah, when you talk about that, and I'm reading your notes here, it says 249,000 would be the source of funding from the town, and 1.19 million would be the funding from other sources. What part of that is the school, and what part of that is the houses?
So let's go to the next page. So right here, thank you. Thank you. So this is the last page in the presentation. So let me talk about that now. So back in April of 2020, 3 months ago, we were required to complete a financial application to the Department of Public Health. And that's the application by which we had to get approved for them to give us the approval letter. And Marcia and I worked on that. Steve helped. And obviously 3 months ago, we came up with our best estimate for the total cost of the project. And back then, I will tell you, I did put numbers in that were very conservative. I believe these numbers are high by at least 15%, maybe even higher. But these were my estimates based in April of 2020, and I came up with $1.8 million. And that number was approved in this grant. So there's the total cost. You can look at the line items and how we came up with the estimates.
Yep.
You can argue that some of those costs, in fact, I can tell you right now, one of those will never incur. And a couple of those I think are on the high side. So that's the uses of funds. The sources of funds are either going to be town money or the grant. So let's start with the grant. The only money the grant will cover are those expenses that are considered to be eligible by this grant. And the only eligible cost, well, right off the bat, no
It's
town.
actually a loan, right, Greg? It's
I'm
not a
sorry, a
grant.
loan. I'm sorry, a loan, not a grant. I'm used to LOTSIP, sorry.
Yeah.
It's a loan, not a grant. I apologize. The only cost, they've already said that some costs right off the top are not eligible. For example, any staff time, any engineering cost, ineligible with the grant. Any other cost could be eligible if you met the bidding guidelines that the state requires. And those bidding guidelines mean you have to qualify a bidder, and then the qualified bidder is guaranteed the work even before you know what price he submits. So clearly, because the construction cost for the length of that line is about $1.4 million, and again, that's a high number, that clearly is going to be what we're going to be shooting for with grant money. Every other one of those line items are relatively small. And with the procurement procedures we have, I will even tell you, picking the engineering contract, we really pushed on price very hard, and got a price about half that amount. So that's kind of the breakdown between the Department of Public Health and town funding. So you look at the total of the 1.8 million. We will be forgiven 25% of that loan amount, and then you come up with a project of 1.4 million. I've been using 1.5 in round numbers as we talk about assessments. We won't know the real actual cost till we get bids back, and we want to get those bids back in January. Once we have the bids and the actual construction cost, we'll be able to tell the property owners what their assessments will be. Okay, so
So looking at your numbers, the grant money, the 397 is 25% of the 1.4 million, correct?
397 is 25% of 1.58 million.
5.8, okay. And where are those numbers coming from? That's the 1.4
That's the contingency.
and
the
a
conti-
contingency,
Yeah,
the 10% contingency. But you said you had, these numbers might be a little high, so that 10% contingency might wash out too, right?
so let me tell you let me tell you where the numbers are going to be high, Glenn. That 3,800 linear feet is actually probably closer to 33 or 3,400 linear feet. When we did this calculation in April, we were assuming we can run the line, that the project would also pay for the lateral to the new school. It won't. It will just pay for the line. It won't approve any money onto private property or town property.
Okay,
So that 3,800 linear feet is more like 33 or 3,400.
okay,
The $380 per linear foot is about $30 higher than the last project that was put in. I put an extra $30 in for ledge and unknowns.
Mhm.
So I will tell you that 1.4 number, in my opinion, is going to come down a bunch, and therefore the 10% contingency is going to come down a bunch.
right. But the contingency is only for overruns anyway. So 32 to 3,800 is a 10% decrease on its own in linear footage, right? So you're looking
right.
at probably a 10% contingency built into your linear footage. So your 144 is probably going to wash out if those numbers are all right, because you're going to gain 10% on the less linear footage.
Yeah, that's
Right.
about right, Glenn.
Right.
Rough
I
cut.
mean, in simple math, it's going to go down 144 roughly, which I could understand. But then as a rough ballpark, the number I need to understand is, and Steve said the town is going to be one of the biggest people paying back the usage fees or whatever we're going to have, is do
Correct.
we know roughly, and I know what you said, Greg, when it's approved, there's all these formulas, and I understand the complicity of it, but do we have an idea of what those breakdowns are?
Yeah, the town will pay somewhere between 45 and 60%. That will be our share of it.
Okay. So then I'm going to go back, and I'm not trying to make issues here and everything, and I'm going to stand up for Mark a little bit in this aspect of things is, yeah, he does sit on two boards, but he does have some knowledge that there could be delays, there could be things that help us make these decisions. And I understand what you said, Steve, but I also understand Mark's position a little bit, that he has knowledge that some of us don't have necessarily to bring
I
to the
agree.
table. So I have
I
to
agree.
stand up for Mark in that aspect of this.
No, I agree with you 100% on that.
What I sort of think I need from my point of view to approve this is for you to sit down with inland wetlands and let's get a ballpark of where we are headed, if we can get some kind of a guidance. I don't know if that's legal or not legal, so you have to step in here, because Greg, and I love Greg's proposals, and I think you and Greg do a great job on projects, and I can follow it really well, and I appreciate all Greg's details. But we're going through an expenditure of a gas line, we're going through the expenditure of a water line. We need to know the end result of this. And I get the position you're in, Steve, so don't take it like I don't understand the chair you're sitting in. I just am a little concerned too of, we're going through a lot of processes in the next month too of borrowing the money, which you and Dan are working on, which I think is a great idea. So let's be clear again, all these are great ideas. I just think we need to make sure some of the blocks are paving our way, that we're pretty stable on our footing for me to make a decision.
I don't disagree with you, but the gas line is being paid for by the schools and they're paying for the entire project. So we're going to dig this road up anyway, whether we put a
But are they
water
still
line in
gonna
or not.
build it if the school doesn't necessarily end up going there? Are they still gonna build it?
No, they wouldn't put a gas line in if the school wasn't going there. But I don't think, the way I look at it, we hired Tecton, our architect, and they've hired a lot of experts and they've gone through this. And I've asked them directly, and Mark, you may disagree with me. Is there anything from an ecological standpoint that would force us to stop this project and move it? And they said to me, no, I don't believe that that's the case at all. So we may have a disagreement here.
Steve,
I know we have to go through the process within the,
If I may.
Yeah.
Steve, if you'll recall, I was very careful to say, I think it's too early to base this project on the school. If you present this to us as a standalone project, that's something different. When you're talking about the school, that's where I have concerns.
yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
So Glenn, to give you an idea of timeline, because Steve can't come to the Board of Wetlands Commission and ask us our opinion, because we don't have an opinion, because we've had one public hearing on it.
I'm
There's
wrong. I appreciate I'm wrong on that.
There's a potential 90 days more, so I don't even have an opinion on it. I just know what I have from their experts and our experts.
Right.
And I haven't made an opinion either way yet. We have a long way to go.
All right.
And we always try to work with every applicant.
All right, hold on, Mark. Hold on. Steve, I'm going to ask a very pointed question. Sorry to cut you off, Mark, but I think
That's all right.
on a standalone project, would you vote for this as a standalone project, as a need for the town? If it weren't for the school, on a standalone, would you see this as our only option out of this?
Yes. And I would say this is our best option. We're getting 25% off the cost. We're getting a 2% interest rate on the loan. We took us 10 months to get this approval. If we were doing this as a normal bonded project, we would be paying the $1.8 million, right? And we would be paying in a normal interest rate environment, as we originally thought for the schools, between 4 and 5% for the project. Right now, this loan is at 2%. Interest rates are at a historical low. So we believe when we go out to borrow money shortly for the school, and Dan is aware of this, Fairfield just went out on a 20-year bond, about the same amount we want to borrow. They got a 1.85% interest rate. It's unheard of. But so all of these things put together, plus the amelioration of the risk that we're facing with these properties, I would support this project, even if the school wasn't involved.
So Mark, that goes back to your play then.
So
right?
my statement is that as a standalone project, I am leaning more towards being in favor of it than not. I just can't link it to a project. I can't link pre-borrowing. I can't link any money to a project that we don't know is going through. We hope it goes through. We don't know that yet. So Greg's numbers, if it does go through and the school does the gas line, Greg's numbers are going to come way down, because the asphalt and the cutting and digging and trenching is all going to come out of the school. So these numbers could potentially
No, that's not that's not actually correct, Mark.
$380 a lineal foot is to dig it up and pave it, right, Greg? And install water.
We have to split the cost of trenching.
Yeah, but
between
that number will come down based on that.
I agree. If we can do them together, it'd be much cheaper.
That's what I'm
Right. So that's what
Technically,
we're
it's
saying.
very difficult.
We're in
to do that.
agreement.
I know your timing is what your timing is, but in order to link it to school, I'm still suggesting that I'm at least 90 days away. That's when a decision probably gets made, my opinion only, on a wetland, on a Huckleberry Hill, getting through wetlands and deciding if that's going. If it's a standalone project, I want to talk about it as a standalone project.
Fine.
Dan D, can you come in? You bring a calmness. Come on.
I'm the least expert person on the phone on the meeting here of any of this. I'm listening. I'm following Mark's lead on this. My only question is on the repayment of the loan. What are the repayment terms?
It's a 20-year repayment.
20 year. All right.
Yeah,
So it's-
twice a year, like we do for every water line. And we do all the assessments. We send out a bill like a normal tax bill.
Yeah, okay. So that part makes sense. In terms of the need, I'm listening to the experts and they're going to follow their lead on this one.
Do we have a sense of the 30 homeowners, how many of them want? We know 6 or 7 or 8 or how many had the bad wells. Do we have any idea how many of the others actually want this? And do they still get assessed when we put it in, even if they don't want to be connected because they like their healthy well water versus?
They would still get assessed for the water line.
Yep.
We have not spoken to every single homeowner on whether they support a water line or not. We plan to do that. I think we should do that.
Yeah,
We have to.
But they still would get assessed, but they would not have to pay for the connection from the water line.
And the booster pump and the connection. I understand that.
Right.
Do we open ourselves to any potential lawsuit if there's a large number of them don't want to hook up to this and they're getting an assessment of $25,000, $30,000?
So
Yeah, you always sometimes have the chance of somebody suing you because they don't want to put a water line in. I'm fine. The overall and the overriding consideration here is what's to the best benefit of most residents. Does that make sense?
It does, but right now we're talking about 6 versus 30, 6 out of 30, so 6 versus
Yeah.
23, potentially.
I don't know, but I think a lot of residents are, given that their neighbors have problems, are concerned about this.
Okay.
And that in order to, at some point in the future, if they want to sell their house, it would be incredibly easy to sell it with aquarium water versus a well.
Because that's what they're looking at is $30,000 assessment based on us paying 45 to 60%. I'm keeping us 50%. So they're paying $30,000 assessment plus the connection fee, which is probably another 15 or 20 grand per house, plus booster. That would include a booster pump and whatnot. So it's a good, it's a solid amount.
Yeah, but I would think even if we don't hook up a school, let's say we have no school, that the town would absorb part of this cost to avoid future expense in providing bottled water to
right. So I'm saying we still absorbing 50% of the cost.
I don't know what percentage, but a good percentage.
Right.
So
Greg, am I right on those numbers?
Yeah, the assessment wouldn't be 30,000 per house.
It can't be 30,000 per house on 30 homes. The number's too big.
It's not 1.8 million. 30 houses is 61,000 each.
It's 1.5
though, Mark, because we're getting a $400,000 loan forgiveness, right?
The net cost comes to 1,190,000 when we're finished, right?
Okay.
About 1.2.
That's fair.
Right.
So we'll call it $1 million. 1 million. Somebody's what?
That would be 33,333 per resident, but the town would absorb a good portion of that.
Right, 17,000, not 30,000. 17 to 20,000 is more in the ballpark.
Okay.
It would average somewhere between $600 and $800 per year per property.
Plus the connection to their home. That's
it's about 1,500 to 2,000.
That's it?
Yeah. It's just a half-inch copper line.
I know what, well, it's 1 copper line to meet current code, but it's digging it up. There might be landscape walkways, driveways, you got to penetrate the foundation. There's work there. You got to get a booster pump. It is not $1,500 worth of work. It's, Greg, did you get any sort of ballpark on that from your contractor, or can you?
I did not. So the project is going to run for those people that want a connection. The project's going to run a lateral to the property line, and the property owner has to take it from there. There's 2 reasons why we're going to be encouraging property owners to tie in while we're doing construction. The first is that we're already going to have the road opened up.
Yep.
And if people say, you know what, I don't want to tie in now, I'm going to wait a year. There is a rule of thumb that the Department of Public Health, Department of Public Works uses. Basically, we're not going to let you open up that road for a couple of years. We just repaved it. So we're going to tell people you either tie in now, or for a couple of years, we're not going to kind of let you to rip that road up again.
Right. Certainly the smart ones will run the 5 or 15 feet, depending on which side of the road they're on, get it onto their property line, put a valve in a buffalo box and be done with it and dig it up later at their
but you can't just bring the box over. You have to hook up.
Aquarian does not allow you to tap a line for a lateral unless you put a meter and you start getting charged. It will not let you do a lateral.
Okay.
Hey, guys.
Midnight plumber.
Guys, I'm sorry. I feel like we're just circling and circling and circling, and I kind of feel we need to move forward because we're going on 3.5 hours now. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
I'm done
on this, Steve and Greg, what is the urgency of voting tonight? Because we are missing Ricky and Eileen on this.
We do have a couple months leeway here. I would say we need to make a decision, Greg, by September.
At
September
the
meeting?
latest, at the
We
latest.
made a decision the next meeting, Steve.
Yeah, well, then we're good with that.
And then maybe we'll have a little more information again and
Yeah.
things. And I would feel more comfortable with Ricky and Eileen on something like this, just to be honest with you.
That's understandable because we're bypassing the town meeting or referendum.
Right,
So
I
I
just would
want-
rather have more opinions to the table, and that doesn't mean I'm saying no on my vote, so I don't want you to think that.
Nope, I understand it completely and I agree with your sentiment.
So I would like to put that on the table, how's that? So Greg, I appreciate everything you've done, and again, your numbers all make sense to me and I can follow them, so thank you very much, Greg.
My pleasure.
So we don't have to make any motions, right? We just don't need to vote on it, right? We can just put it on the agenda. for
Usually you
next-
make a motion to table.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. We table the Candlewood Lake Water Main to our next meeting.
I second that.
Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Steve said a no. All right, it's all good.
I
All
just shook
right.
my head.
Any other items before the board? None? Any public comment? Anybody still around?
Just Greg and Dan.
Brianna, make the motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All those- Second, we
He's
need a
on mute,
second.
but he seconded it.
Said it very happily.
I'll second it. All those in favor, aye. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
bye.